Chapter 213. The smile on Yeshen's face froze in an instant. Then, it became very ugly. The sky thunder killed his loyal warriors. He glared at Yang Chendong and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know that we are still negotiating?" Yang Chendong ignored Yeshen's roar. Instead, he grinned and revealed a sinister smile. Then, he switched to his left hand and gestured at the warhorse under Yeshen. As if to coordinate with this gesture, a bullet suddenly flew out from an unknown place and shot into his strong warhorse. The originally strong horse suddenly neighed in pain and fell to its knees with a plop. The sudden movement of the warhorse caught Yeshen off guard. He fell from the warhorse without any warning. Because he was quite skilled, he did not get his face covered in dust. He only staggered a little and his body tilted a little, but he quickly returned to his original state. With a push of his right hand and a tap of his left hand, Yeshen was no longer as unforgiving as before. He became much more obedient. However, the soldiers behind him did not know what happened. When they saw their leader fall from the warhorse, they thought that something bad had happened. Suddenly, 5 strong horses rushed out and leaped straight at him. "Fall all of you!" Since he wanted to establish his might, he naturally wouldn't give the other party a chance. Under Yang Chendong's angry roar, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team ambushed behind him took action. The 5 warhorses were locked in an instant. Only half of the way forward, they fell to the ground one by one. With night vision goggles and advanced sniping techniques, Bai Zhuo and his team members had complete control of the small battlefield. Above, seeing that 5 of their own warriors had fallen, the other Vala people were still shouting in disbelief. However, they were the first to react quickly. They turned around and gathered their chi in their dantian, shouting loudly, "All of you, stop. Without my orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law." Yeshen was really scared. He was frightened by Yang Chendong's gesture. He could not see what the other party did, but his men died one by one. Could it be that he really knew some kind of magic? Yeshen, who had doubts in his heart, quickly analyzed that Yang Chendong did not mean to kill him. Otherwise, why would he talk so much nonsense? If he pointed at him, wouldn't he die on the ground like the other Walla cavalry? Since he knew that Yang Chendong did not want to kill him, he was calm. First, he stopped his men from acting rashly. Then, when he looked at Yang Chendong, his tone became much gentler. He even asked with a hint of respect, "Tell me, what do you want? I don't think you want to kill me, right?" "That's right." Yang Chendong clapped his hands as if he was praising Yeshen's understanding. However, this slap gave him a fright. He instinctively tensed up his body and prepared to defend himself at any time. It was as if he thought that this slap was some kind of demonic technique. Yang Chendong did not ridicule Yeshen's loss of composure. Instead, he said in a calm tone, "In the eyes of Marquis, your life is the same as the other Walla people's lives. It is not worth a penny more. Therefore, Marquis has no need to kill you. This time, I asked you to come out to talk to you about the Walla army retreating." "Retreating?" Yeshen was puzzled. "Yes, it's retreating. Of course, if you don't retreat, Marquis also has the ability to kill all of you here, just like in the Tuma Castle. Although you have fewer people, you still manage to kill 500,000 soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty." Yang Chendong knew what the other party was suspecting. It was nothing more than the lack of military strength, so he casually gave an example. As soon as he heard about the Battle of the Tuma Castle, Yeshen's face showed a proud expression, but after he understood what Yang Chendong meant, his face changed instantly. "Do you think you can be like our Walla warriors and win with fewer people? What? Do you think the effect of the heavenly thunder is still not enough? If that's the case, then Marquis doesn't mind a few more." Yang Chendong saw that Yeshen still wanted to get lucky. His face changed immediately, and then he slowly raised his right hand again. This action made Yeshen's expression change. "Wait, I believe you." Yeshen couldn't help but be nervous. The effect of the heavenly thunder was too powerful. A casual strike could kill hundreds and thousands of people. If such a heavenly thunder struck again, he was worried that Walla's morale would be destroyed. If that was the case, how could they still talk about dominating the Great Ming Dynasty? Yeshen finally became obedient, and Yang Chendong naturally withdrew his right hand. How is it? Do you agree to retreat? I agree. This chief will order the entire army to retreat. Yi Xian said in a somewhat dispirited manner. This time, he had come full of confidence, but he returned in disappointment. If it was anyone else, their expression would not be good. No. Who knew that when Yang Chendong heard that the whole army should retreat, he shook his head. We have to retreat, but not like this. Marquis remembered correctly. In the Tuma castle, you should have captured a lot of Ming Dynasty soldiers. Now send them back. If there is one less person, you don't have to go back. What? Are you threatening me? When he heard that Yang Chendong wanted all the captives, Yeshen's expression changed. He widened his eyes, as if he was going to fight for his life. Yang Chendong, who had already controlled the situation, acted as if he didn't see Yeshen's so-called fierce face. Marquis is threatening you. What? Are you not convinced? If that's the case, Marquis doesn't mind using the heavenly thunder to destroy you. After that, Marquis will lead the army into Wala. When that time comes, not only will the great Ming Dynasty's captives be taken back, even the women and children of Wala will become the great Ming Dynasty's captives. Do you believe me? Yang Chendong said without showing any weakness. These words were like thousands of needles piercing Yeshen's heart, making him unable to refute. If it was someone else who said this, he might laugh out loud and give the order to kill them. However, these words came from Yang Chendong's mouth. Thinking back to the various actions just now, he was really worried that the other party would do this. In the face of such a powerful heavenly thunder, could the Wala cavalry really withstand it? While Yes Hen was still thinking about how to deal with it, Yang Chendong continued to speak. Marquis only asked you to return the captives. He didn't ask for the gold and silver that you robbed. This is already extra lenient. Furthermore, in Willow Town dozens of miles away, your vanguard army is surrounded by Marquis. If you return the great Ming Dynasty's captives, Marquis can also let these people go. This is a fair trade. If you don't agree, then there's no need to talk. Marquis will kill you within 3 breaths. After speaking, Yang Chendong gently raised his left hand. This action clearly meant to kill Yes Hen. He had already seen the serious consequences of reaching out his left and right hands, so he didn't dare to test the law. He immediately shouted, "Wait, this is such a big matter. No matter what, this chief has to go back and discuss it with his subordinates first. I'm sorry, before all the great Ming Dynasty's captives are released, you can't leave here." Yang Chendong shook his head and said with a look that said, "Don't play tricks, it's useless to think about it." Are you going to take me as a hostage? Yes Hen said very discontentedly when he heard this. It was just that after saying the sentence, he didn't speak anymore. The reality was already like this. Wasn't it too late for him to react now? He couldn't leave, and he couldn't beat him. Reality forced Yes Hen to agree to Yang Chendong's conditions. However, although he agreed, Yes Hen was still a little worried. Would Yang Chendong act shamelessly? Therefore, after hesitating for a while, he raised his head and said, "Loyal Marquis, but I don't know if you will let me go if I release the captives. Also, will you release all the besieged warriors in Wala?" Seeing that Yes Hen also wanted to make a request, Yang Chendong said indifferently, "What? Do you think that other than believing in Marquis, you have the qualifications to negotiate with Marquis?" After being said this by Yang Chendong, Yeshen's face changed again and again. It was obvious that he was very angry. Marquis is joking with you. In fact, with your intelligence, you can think about it. If Marquis wanted to kill you, why would he talk nonsense with you? As for the captives of the great Ming, Marquis can bring his army to kill them after killing all of you. Presumably, Wala doesn't have the strength to stop the great Ming's army now. However, Marquis didn't do this, which is already a kind of sincerity. As for your people who are besieged in Willow Town, I have to trouble you to send someone to inform them not to try to break out of the encirclement. Tell them to stay here obediently and wait for the results of our negotiation. Naturally, they will be released. During this period, if anyone dares to act rashly, they will only die. Don't blame Marquis for not reminding you. Since he had already said this, Yes Hen had to accept it even if he didn't want to. However, after thinking about it carefully, Yang Chendong didn't seem to have the intention to destroy Walla. Otherwise, he could do it now and Yes Hen wouldn't have the strength to fight back. There was no other choice. Yes Hen was forced by Yang Chendong's strength and finally lowered his head. He turned around and shouted to the army behind him. He called a few fast horse scouts and arranged them to inform the brothers in Willow Town not to act rashly. In addition, they were to inform the captives of the Great Ming Army to escort them back to the loyal Marquis. After the order was given, the scouts left. Yang Chendong smiled and waved his hand. The first guard captain, Chiu Vi, brought people to deliver wine and food to Yes Hen. Leader Walla, the night is long and there are too many things to do. Why don't we drink while waiting? Yes Hen looked at the wooden table in front of him, as well as the hot food and wine. He was even more surprised in his heart. The loyal Marquis of the Great Ming seemed to have calculated everything and knew that he would compromise. He even prepared wine and food. Well, there was nothing to say. Let's eat first. Chapter 214. Willow Town. After Borromeo met up with General Naigong, he tried to charge out a few more times, but they all ended in failure. After many warriors died, the morale of the army began to waver. When faced with the general's order to break out of the encirclement, not many people were willing to go along with it. Charging out despite knowing that they would die wasn't bravery, but recklessness. Everyone only had one life. Who was willing to die so carelessly? As they waited and broke out of the encirclement, the sky gradually began to brighten. It also welcomed the scouts sent out by Yes Hen. When the scouts arrived and said that their leader didn't want them to break out of the encirclement and to wait in Willow Town, the first to disagree was Borromeo. This time, he came with great ambition, but suffered heavy losses time and time again. This made him feel great shame. Seeing that the sky was already bright, the problem that restricted their vision was solved. It was time to charge out, but he was told to stay in place and wait for orders. How could he be willing to accept that? Did my big brother really say that? Does he know that we have already investigated that there are only a few thousand Ming soldiers surrounding us? With our 20,000 soldiers, we can definitely charge out. When that time comes, it will be our time of great victory. Borromeo said to the scouts with a face of unwillingness. Unfortunately, these scouts didn't have any status. They were only here to pass on a message. They couldn't give any reply to Borromeo's words. Seeing that the scouts didn't say anything, Borromeo straightforwardly shook his head. You said that my big brother is facing off against the loyal Marquis, right? That's good. Say, if you suddenly charge out of Willow Town and come behind the loyal Marquis, do you think you can eliminate him with a pincer attack? If that's the case, will there be anyone in the Great Ming Dynasty who dares to oppose the Walla? There shouldn't be anyone. The scouts seemed to have seen some hope as they replied. In reality, the scouts didn't really understand the order this time. However, since their leader had spoken, they had to carry it out. Seeing that the scouts he sent agreed with his suggestion, Borromeo couldn't help but be overjoyed. But since the people sent by Big Brother have agreed, then we will do as this general says. As soon as Borromeo finished speaking, the vanguard general beside him immediately raised a different opinion. We can't do that. The scouts are only there to relay orders. They don't understand the situation on the battlefield at all, so we should listen to the leader. The scouts don't understand the situation on the battlefield, but we do. General Naigong, don't tell me that you've become discouraged and scared after being defeated a few times in one night. You're our Vala's general, you should be brave and fearless. Borromeo said with a mocking smile. After being refuted by Borromeo, the general's expression changed again and again. However, he was not good with words and didn't know what to say. In the end, he simply turned his head away and used his actions instead of his mouth to express himself. If you want to disobey, then go ahead. This general will listen to the leader's orders and stay in Willow Town obediently. There were less than 4,000 soldiers left in the original vanguard army, which did not affect the overall situation. Since it didn't make sense, Borromeo decided to just ignore it. He would just lead the army forward. At that time, he would kill the Great Ming's loyal Marquis and the credit would be his alone. Perhaps it was because he couldn't wait any longer, or perhaps it was because he wanted to make a contribution, that child Borromeo ignored his elder brother's orders and began to gather his troops. Taking advantage of the darkness of the sky, he headed for the western end of Willow Town and made a counterattack. The sky was already bright. Commander Xiao Feng and Commander Wu Sheng, who were in charge of guarding here, could also clearly see some of the situation in Willow Town. With the help of binoculars, they could see even further than the enemy. The Walla soldiers in the town suddenly began to gather. This scene was clearly captured by the two of them, and they quickly guessed the enemy's intentions and thoughts. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support at any time. They knew that the Walla cavalry in town outnumbered them by 10 times. For safety reasons, it was also the 6th young master's order to inform Tiger's man to prepare once they discovered something that couldn't be disobeyed. Xiao Feng and Wu Xing didn't dare to be careless and quickly made preparations. In less than an hour, the west side of Willow Town suddenly became much more lively. Countless Walla cavalry charged out from here. Borromeo even took the initiative to lead the charge. He wanted to use his actions to inspire the other warriors to charge out of Willow Town and kill the Great Ming's loyal marquis. They're coming out, they're coming out. Everyone get ready. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support. After seeing countless enemies appear in front of their eyes, Xiao Feng and Wu Sheng both gave military orders to their own cold front soldiers. At the same time, they used the radio communicator to inform Tiger's man that they could fire. After Tiger's man received Xiao Feng and Wu Sheng's request for reinforcements, he immediately loaded another FGT-203mm towed cannon that hadn't fired yet. One of the two FGT-203mm towed cannons was aimed at Yeshen's camp, while the other was aimed at Willow Town. At this moment, Tiger's man received the news and used the second cannon to fire. Borromeo was leading tens of thousands of Walla cavalry to charge out of Willow Town. Under his leadership, the morale of the army increased by a lot. Adding on the fact that they had a large number of people, they seemed to have an unstoppable momentum when they charged out of town. However, this seemingly powerful momentum was met with a hail of bullets from Xiao Feng's 1st Company and Wu Sheng's 4th Company. Over 100 cavalrymen fell to the ground. However, this momentum didn't seem to have any intention of fading. On the contrary, it became more and more intense. With the continuous charge, more and more Walla cavalry fell to the ground. It was to the point that the path forward was blocked by the corpses of the war horses and soldiers. But in the end, because there were too many cavalrymen, they still managed to charge out. Among the crowd, when Borromeo saw that they had made it out of the town, his face lit up with joy. Holding a saber in his hand, he shouted loudly, a bloodthirsty glint in his eyes. He wanted to charge forward and kill all the Ming soldiers who had heavily injured the Walla cavalrymen, letting them know what it meant to overestimate one's abilities. Seeing the Walla army charging out and getting closer and closer to them, the 3 commanders of the Ming army, Sun Tong, Yang Jie, and Mao Fushou, all had pale faces. Even though they still had 3,000 Ming soldiers under their command, they were all trembling in fear in the face of Walla's army. It looked like they would collapse at any moment. Boom! Just as the Ming army was in chaos and chaos was about to break out at any moment, just as Xiao Feng and Wu Sheng were shooting with all their might with Lung Feng, the enemy was getting closer and closer due to their disadvantage in numbers. Just as it was extremely dangerous, a loud explosion suddenly sounded above their heads. Following that, a cannonball landed in the middle of Walla's army. The cannonball landed right where the Walla cavalry were most concentrated. With just one cannonball, at least 100 Walla cavalry soldiers were killed. As for the number of people who were injured, it was even more uncountable. Unfortunately, Borromeo was in the crowd. His originally ferocious face was directly swallowed by the cannonball. Not even his bones were left. Borromeo died, along with nearly 100 cavalrymen and even more injured people. This cannonball also stunned the advancing Walla cavalry. Before this, they had some understanding of the cannons of the Ming dynasty. However, those cannons could only shoot out a heavy iron ball. The damage it could cause was only in a straight line. As long as they avoided the iron ball that could only attack in a straight line, their lives would not be in danger. How could it be like this cannonball that landed without any warning? Moreover, when it landed under the flames, its lethality was so great that it gave people the feeling that there was no way to avoid it. The people who were stunned by the cannonball reined in their horses and stopped. Borromeo had died in battle. Without their commander, they felt like they did not know where to go. It was at this time that the second cannonball arrived. It once again landed in the crowd, causing the deaths of hundreds of cavalrymen and the injuries of hundreds of cavalrymen. Retreat. Seeing the soldiers around them being killed by the cannonballs and muskets, the morale that had just been built up instantly collapsed. The smart soldiers knew that if they retreated back to the town, they would not face such danger. In an instant, many of them retreated. This was like a plague that quickly spread. Other than the Wala cavalry at the front who could not turn back and became Lung Feng's target, the rest of the Wala cavalry retreated back to the town. The battle finally ended with the death of nearly 2,000 people. The ground was littered with corpses and the smell of blood. It seemed like this battle was originally a child's play. The army retreated back to the town and Nai Gong took over the command. When he ordered everyone not to leave without orders, he also sent out scouts to inform leader Yes Hen of what had happened. The scouts rushed out of the town and rushed in front of Lung Feng and the Ming soldiers with a terrified expression. Their faces were filled with fear, as if they were afraid that they would be killed by these murderous gods. If not for Yang Chendong's orders to allow the scouts to move back and forth, no one would be able to leave this place alive. The scouts rushed all the way and finally met with leader Yes Hen. They recounted in detail what had happened in Willow Town. When they mentioned that the child General Borromeo had been killed by the heavenly lightning, they did not even dare to raise their heads. Hearing that another brother had died on the battlefield, Yeshen's expression was naturally very ugly. However, he could not ask Yang Chendong for an explanation. It was his brother who did not listen to orders and took the initiative to fight. Now that he had died, who else could he blame? Forget it. Quickly inform the troops behind to bring all the captives of the Ming army here. Remember, all of them. Do not leave a single one alive. Whoever dares to leave behind the captives of the Ming army, I will leave behind his head. Yes Hen, who was really scared by Yang Chendong, did not dare to play any tricks. He issued a strict order to his troops. Chapter 215. In the Imperial Palace, Daizong Zhuqiu was pacing back and forth in the throne room. Because he was worried about the battle ahead, he could no longer remain seated on the dragon throne. Standing below were all the fourth-rank officials in the capital and above. They all looked anxious and uneasy, and everyone had a grim expression on their faces. The battle to defend the capital had undoubtedly reached a critical juncture. It would take at least 3 days for the new order to rescue the emperor to arrive at the capital. If the loyal marquis lost to Yes Hen, the entire capital would be in danger, and everyone's lives would be in danger. But an entire night had passed, and there had been no report from the front line. How could they not be worried? At this moment, many people began to miss the rule of having eunuchs supervise the army. If there were eunuchs present, they would have already sent someone back to report what had happened on the front line. They would not be like this, where everyone could only passively and anxiously wait. The officials had been here since early in the morning, but there was nothing they could do. Some of the officials were unwilling to wait. Seeing that there was nothing they could do, Minister of War Yi Ming stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, should we send someone to the front line to see what the situation is like? No matter what, we have to make preparations early." There were many explanations for what make preparations early meant. If they won, they naturally had to make preparations to celebrate. If they lost, they had to make preparations to flee. That's right, that's right. With Yi Ming taking the lead, the other officials quickly responded. One by one, they stood up and spoke to the emperor. How could Zhu Qiu not want to know the situation on the front line? For this reason, he had sent out many scouts and spies, but not a single one had returned. At this time, he truly didn't know who to send out. On the other hand, Great Eunuch Jin Ying's eyes turned as he thought of something. He carefully took 2 steps forward and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Your Majesty, we can send the embroidered uniform guard commissioner Hu Zhangning and request that he bring back the news." Hu Zhangning? Zhu Qiu's brow creased as he began to think about this person. Zhu Qiu, who had recently spent a lot of time to understand the officials, quickly figured out Hu Zhangning's identity. This person was not only the eldest son of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, but more importantly, he was also the father-in-law of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chendong. The people that had been sent out earlier must have been stopped by Yang Chendong and were not allowed to return. However, if Hu Zhangning were to go and face his father-in-law, he would not be able to stop him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh at how smart Jining was. He immediately turned around and asked the officials, "Is Minister Hu Zhangning here?" "Your subject is here." When Hu Changning, who was standing behind the officials, heard the emperor's words, he was stunned for a moment. Then he stepped forward with a board in his hand. When the officials saw that the emperor was calling for Hu Zhangning, they quickly opened up a path so that the guardian of the brocade guard could face the emperor directly. "Beloved Minister Hu, we now order you to bring people to the front lines to understand the situation of the battle, then quickly report back. Remember, you must complete this order as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will be severely punished." Zhu Qiu purposely emphasized the word severely in order to remind Hu Zhangning that it was his son-in-law who was leading the troops into battle. No one would make things difficult for him unless he wanted to make things difficult for himself. Hu Zhangning naturally understood Zhu Qiu's meaning. In his heart, he did not want to make things difficult for his son-in-law. However, since he had the emperor's order, he did not dare to disobey. "Your subject obeys the emperor's order. I will definitely go and return quickly." After saying this, Hu Zhangning turned and left the hall. Seeing Hu Zhangning's figure disappear, Zhu Qiu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Presumably, before long, there would be a report from the front lines. Hopefully it would be good news. After Hu Zhangning left the palace, he brought along Lieutenant Gao and two other Hu family servants and headed straight for the northern side of the capital. Riding at top speed, they arrived at the east side of Willow Town in less than 4 hours. Here, they were stopped by a group of Ming soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. In this team, there were 2 men in camouflage clothing who looked very energetic. "For you, get off your horse and report your identity." Seeing that there were horses coming from the direction of the capital, the 2 men in camouflage clothing looked at each other and smiled. They had already stopped several groups like this. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. He wanted Zhu Qiu to understand the cruelty of war and make him worried and afraid. If you wanted to make others afraid of you, it was not as simple as beating them up. Sometimes, raising a stick of pressure and not letting it fall would give people a feeling of intimidation. Seeing the Ming army blocking the road, Hu Zhangning, who was leading the group, knew that this should be the Ming army that was fighting against the Walla. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and reported his name. "This official is the imperial guardian of the embroidered uniform guard, Hu Zhangning. Under the emperor's orders, I have come to investigate the situation of the battle. You only need to report the truth." "What imperial guardian? I've never heard of him. Just tie him up as well." The 2 men in camouflage clothing chuckled. In front of them, the so-called Great Ming Army did not have the slightest bit of deterrence. After laughing, they ordered the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to tie up Hu Zhangning as usual. The Ming army seemed to be used to this kind of thing. They did not even blink as they walked toward Hu Zhangning and the other 3. Although they were Ming soldiers, after witnessing the power of the cold guards, they had already submitted to them in their hearts. In addition, they were just carrying out orders. If something happened, they did not have to take any responsibility. There was no need for them to be courteous. They just held the ropes and strode forward. "Wait, what are you doing? Do you know who we are?" Seeing that the Ming army was about to tie up Hu Zhangning, Lieutenant Gao Sheng, who was following by the side, shouted. At the same time, he pulled out the embroidered spring saber at his waist. When they saw Gao Sheng pull out the steel saber, a glint of excitement flashed across the eyes of the 2 cold guards. They were afraid that the people who came would not resist. If that happened, they would not be able to use their skills. Now, someone actually wanted to play tricks. This was exactly what they wanted. The two cold guards held two pitch-black and cold 95 styles in their hands. One of them had already aimed his gun at the steel saber in Gao Sheng's hand. He was confident that he could break the saber with one shot. This way, the other party would not be able to resist. Stop! Hu Zhangning had long heard of the power of the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands. He did not want to take the risk. He immediately shouted at Gao Sheng to stop him from acting rashly. At the same time, he looked at the two cold guards and said, "Where is Yang Chendong? I am his father-in-law." When they heard someone call out the sixth young master's name, the two cold guards revealed a cold glint in their eyes. It was as if they were about to attack at any time. However, when they heard the next sentence, they were stunned. This person was actually the father-in-law of the sixth young master. If they really offended him, wouldn't they be severely punished later? At that moment, the two of them put down the 95 styles in their hands. One of them was still skeptical as he asked, "Are you really Marquis Yang's father-in-law?" Noticing the change in attitude of the two mercenaries, Hu Zhangning let out a long sigh and said proudly, "I'm the real deal. How about this? Call Yang Chendong over and we'll know if it's real or not." Please wait for a moment. We'll call the company commander over." The two cold guards did not dare to act rashly. However, they would not completely believe the other party's words either. They decided to call the company commander, Ting Shan, over and let him determine if it was real or not. Hu Zhangning and the other three did not move. They were surrounded by more than 10 Ming Dynasty soldiers. One of the cold guards stayed behind and stared at the four of them cautiously. From the looks of it, he seemed to be ready to attack at any time. Not long after, Ting Shan, who was also wearing a camouflage uniform but had the insignia of a major, hurried over. Tao Jin, the commander, came with him. As for Commander Gao Li, he stayed behind and was in charge of watching the Walla cavalry in Willow Town to prevent them from making any strange movements. Teng Shan did not know Hu Zhangning. However, he knew that the sixth young master had married Hu Yen as his first wife. This time, he brought Tao Jin over so that he could identify the people. Tao Jin was one of the commanders of the 5 cities warden's office. Naturally, he was familiar with all the noble families in the capital. From afar, when he saw that the person who came was indeed Hu Zhangning, he hurriedly cupped his fist and said politely, "So it's Lord Hu. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." Since Tao Jin had said so, how could it be fake? Teng Shan immediately saluted politely and said, "This subordinate is the commander of the 3rd company of mercenaries. Greetings, Lord Hu." This company commander is too polite. Since the other party's attitude was so respectful, Hu Zhangning naturally greeted him with a smile. Then he asked, "Oh right, why don't I see the loyal Marquis? May I know where he is now?" "Lord Hu, Yang Marquis is not here. He is meeting with the Walla's leader, Yes Hen, at the front line. I don't know what business you have, but if you must meet with Yang Marquis, I will have to report it," Teng Shan said politely. He could ignore other people, but in front of Hu Zhangning he could not put on any airs. Hearing that Yang Chendong was meeting with Yes Hen, Hu Zhangning was shocked and asked, "Meeting? Is there any danger?" "There shouldn't be any danger for now, but I don't know the specific situation." Teng Shan shook his head. It was true that Hu Zhangning was the father-in-law of the 6th young master, but he was not a member of the Yang family, so there was no need for him to explain. He did not know the specific situation of Yang Chendong, but when he thought of the strength of the mercenaries and Yang Chendong's ability to plan ahead, Hu Zhangning was not too worried. "I see, but how is the situation now? The emperor is waiting for my reply." I don't know the specific situation. But what I can tell Lord Hu is that the Walla's army has been blocked by us outside Willow Town. They will not threaten the safety of the capital." Teng Shan hesitated for a moment and gave a rough explanation. As for the specific situation, without the authorization of the 6th young master, he would not reveal it. Chapter 216. Although he didn't see Yang Chendong, Teng Shan's answer was enough for Hu Zhangning to go back and report on his mission. A satisfied smile finally appeared on his face. Hu Zhangning quickly returned from the capital. He brought back the information he had gathered from the front line and the scouts he had sent out. He also explained in Tingshan's words that he had no choice but to detain the scouts to prevent anyone from leaking information about the battlefield. He asked for the emperor's understanding. Zhu Qiu was indeed a little angry about the scouts being detained. But when he thought about how he still had to rely on Yang Chendong for the front line, how could he take such a small matter to heart? Especially when he heard Hu Jiangning say that the Wala army had been successfully stopped and that the capital was no longer in danger, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief and laughed with joy. Not only Zhu Qiu, but the other important officials were also very happy when they heard that the capital was no longer in danger. Now, they just had to wait for Yang Chendong's triumphant return. At the front line, a large number of Ming captives were sent over. On the Ming army's side, Deputy Chief Yang Guang came forward with 5,000 cavalrymen and was responsible for escorting the captives back to the capital safely. When accepting the captives, Yang Chendong asked the crowd if there were any captives left in the Wala. After receiving the majority's answer that all the captives had been returned, Yang Chendong breathed a sigh of relief. The number of captives received this time was more than 75,000. Most of them were brave soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles. They were just scared out of their wits before, so they couldn't display their full strength on the battlefield. Yang Chendong could imagine that with these 75,000 captives, the safety of the capital would no longer be a problem. Zhu Qizhen could finally sleep without worry. He had successfully completed the important task of protecting the capital of the great Ming dynasty. As for whether these people would be used by Zhu Qiu to deal with him in the future, Yang Chendong wasn't too worried. Firstly, he had the mercenaries in his hands, so he had to think carefully before making a move. Secondly, these people were all saved by him, so they would have a lot of resistance in their hearts to deal with him. Thirdly, Zhu Qizhen was still in Nanjing, so Dai Zong had to think carefully before making a move against him. With these 3 points, his safety shouldn't be a problem. After dealing with the captives, it was time to release the Wala army and let them leave. This was what worried Yes Hen the most. Previously, when he was controlled by someone, he had no choice but to do as Yang Chendong said. Now that the matter was done, would he keep his promise and let's release him and the tens of thousands of Wala cavalry? On this point, Yes Hen was a little worried. Everything was as Yang Chendong said before. If he really wanted to deal with the Wala, then he could directly take out a few more cannons from the warehouse. He didn't have to worry about not being able to defeat the Wala, but he didn't do so. He still knew the principle of putting away the bow after the birds are done. If he didn't leave a big enemy for Zhu Qiu, then when he really wanted to deal with him, he would have no scruples. Therefore, when Yang Chendong released more than 20,000 captives from Willow Town and let them join Yes Hen, this person was so moved that he cried out. It was no wonder that he did this. The population of the Wala was not large, and there were even fewer young men who could fight. If all the captives were killed this time, then he would really become a commander without an army. He was afraid that when he returned to the grassland, he wouldn't be able to dominate the grassland, and it would be a miracle if he didn't get bullied by others. Seeing that more than 20,000 cavalry had safely retreated, when he looked at Yang Chendong, Yes Hen said in a very admiring tone, "Marquis of the Great Ming, you are a real man. You do what you say, which is admirable. If you are willing, the two of us can join forces. At that time, no one in the Great Ming will be our opponent. At that time, there will be gold, silver, treasures, and beautiful women for us to choose from. Isn't that better?" Yes Hen invited sincerely, and Yang Chendong's face showed a smile. "Leader Yes Hen, there is not only one Great Ming in the world. There are many countries and ethnic groups in places that we don't know about. Why do you only want to deal with the Great Ming?" Yang Chendong's answer made Yes Hen stunned. He didn't expect such an answer. He lowered his head, and after hesitating for a moment, he raised his head and said, "As you said, this world may be very big, but we can't even deal with the Great Ming. How can we talk about other grand plans?" No. Yang Chendong stretched out his right index finger and made a shaking motion. "As the leader of the Wala, you must first have confidence in your captives. With them, you can achieve something. As for why you can't take down the Great Ming, it is because your strength is too weak. There is an old saying in the Central Plains, and I will give it to you here. To forge iron you must be strong. Without enough strength, you can't achieve anything just by relying on the other party's mistakes. To forge iron, you must be strong. Yes Hen thought about this sentence thoughtfully. Yes, that's right. Walla doesn't lack soldiers who are brave enough to risk their lives. Your living environment and conditions made your men very brave at a very young age. On the battlefield, they can gallop everywhere. But do you know why they still failed? Yang Chendong nodded and guided Yes Hen. Why did they fail? This question was also what Yes Hen wanted to ask. Because your own ability to produce blood is insufficient. If you rely on robbing, this kind of ethnic group is destined to not go far. Yang Chendong chuckled and continued, you lack all kinds of resources. You are complacent when you get something, and your ambition is satisfied. Since you are satisfied, you are not far away from the days when you lose. This is why although the Walla army is brave and can do some earth-shattering things from time to time, it can't escape the fate of being destroyed and replaced by others. In the end, it is because you can't win the hearts of the people. The reason you can't win the hearts of the people is because the people are not rich. They follow you, but in the end, they can't even fill their stomachs. Who would really risk their lives? On the other hand, if the country is rich and the people are strong, it means that someone wants to deal with you. In order to ensure the fruits of their victory, they have no choice but to take out their weapons and fight with their lives. One is spontaneous, the other is forced. Tell me, which one is more effective? Rich and the people are strong? Yes Hen was shocked by Yang Chendong's words. It was not that he didn't think about some things here, but he didn't know how to do it. Now that Yang Chendong brought up this problem, he should have a solution. Yes Hen said excitedly. The Ming dynasty's loyal marquis, but I don't know if there is a way to solve this problem. Of course there is. That is to develop commerce. The grassland is only rich in livestock. The natural environment makes you have a great demand for many other things. If they could start a business, then not only could they be self-sufficient, they could also sell their surplus to other places and earn a profit from the difference in price. They could also trade with people from other regions for things they needed. In short, they could earn more money, and gradually, Tile would become stronger. Once you have money, you will be able to do a lot of things. At that time, it will be much easier for you to expand again. Whether it is money or cavalry, you will be in an invincible position. When Yang Chendong said this, he seemed to have seen some kind of result. His face was full of excitement. At that time, the Tatars will not be a stumbling block for your expansion. On the contrary, they will become your base, the base of talent reserves. When you need soldiers, you can use a lot of gold and silver to make them work for you. In the north of your country, there is a country called Tsarist Russia. I think you should more or less know about it. That country is vast and rich in resources. Its area is much larger than the Ming dynasty, but its population is very small. That is the place you need to conquer. Remember Genghis Khan? Don't you want to be like your ancestors? A majestic strategic map was placed in front of Yes Hen. After Yang Chendong said this, his heart was suddenly moved. It was like a person in the dark who saw the light, a person in a desperate situation who saw hope. It made Yes Hen feel like he was reborn. Can we really do this? When he returned to reality, Yes Hen said with some uncertainty, why can't we do it? The reason why the Ming dynasty has such a vast land and the prosperity of the people is the result of trade. If this is the case, why can't the Walla do it? Yang Chendong did not answer directly. Instead, he asked Yes Hen a question in a rhetorical way. Yes Hen could not answer this question, but he could continue to ask questions. So, does the loyal marquis want the Walla and the Ming dynasty to stop attacking each other and resume trade? Yang Chendong shook his head. It is to establish trade with marquis. This time, I'll be the one providing you with the goods. It won't be as simple as before, where I'll set up a horse farm to exchange for the goods you need with the Central Plains people. Instead, you will use silver to buy the goods I provide at a low price. Finally, through your hands, you will sell them at a high price. At that time, you will find that doing this will allow you to earn more silver. Then, you will be able to buy more things and do more things. In the end, Yang Chendong revealed his purpose. At the end of the day, Yang Chendong wanted to sell his goods and earn more silver to develop himself. At the same time, he wanted to increase his reputation. If he were to do the business himself, the speed would be too slow and the risk would be too great. If he really sent the Lung Feng to protect him, he did not know how much manpower he would have to put in. This was not proportional to what he would gain. At least for now, there were not many Lung Feng, so he could not split himself up. Chapter 217. But if he could convince Yes Hen, then it would be different. The current Walla was equivalent to the king of the grassland, and very few people dared to provoke them. If they were the ones who transported the goods, perhaps some of the profits would be shared by the other party, but compared to what he earned, it was already a lot. With the help of Walla, he could sell things to the Eurasian continent, which was equivalent to stretching out his tentacles one step ahead. This would play a very positive role in conquering, ruling, and occupying that place in the future. This was Yang Chendong's real goal. Yes Hen was indeed smart and cunning. But when facing Yang Chendong, these characteristics of his were useless. They were not on the same level at all. Whether it was thinking, knowledge, or martial strength, they were all on a completely different level. How could he be Yang Chendong's opponent? At this time, Yes Hen not only did not know Yang Chendong's ultimate goal, but he was also attracted by the other party's idea of strengthening himself through trade. He was not short of money. This time, after defeating Ingzong, he seized a lot of gold and silver, which completely had the foundation to trade with Yang Chendong. Now what he had to consider was whether the bold and loyal Marquis words could be trusted, and why did the other party take the initiative to help him? Did he want to see the emergence of a powerful neighbor? If he couldn't figure this out, Walla didn't dare to make any decisions. "Why are you helping me?" Yes Hen finally asked, which meant that he was seriously considering his own opinion. Yang Chendong was happy in his heart, but he didn't show the slightest expression on his face. On the contrary, he showed a seemingly very heavy expression and said, "Marquis is from the Great Ming Dynasty, and my relatives and friends are here. Marquis really doesn't want to see them get hurt. As long as Walla doesn't invade, a lot of people can live. So Marquis wants to find a way out for you, a way out that doesn't invade the Great Ming Dynasty and can develop yourself." Yes Hen couldn't help but nod his head when he heard such a high-sounding reason. Obviously, as a Walla, he did not want his people to be invaded by other countries. Of course, Marquis liked silver very much. With money, he could do more of the things he liked. Since trading with Walla can guarantee Marquis' interests, why not? Yang Chendong offered another reason while Yes Hen was still deep in thought. Compared to the first reason, the second reason was much more practical. It also made Yang Chendong look more like an ordinary person. Haha. Hearing that, he burst into laughter. Obviously, this second reason was more persuasive and moved him. Because of this, he chose to believe in Yang Chendong. His loud laughter set the tone for the trade between the two sides. Then, they each put forward some requirements and conditions. For example, Yeshen's requirement was that the things Yang Chendong provided must be easy to sell and practical. If it was flashy, they had the right to refuse. Also, they could choose not to attack the Great Ming Dynasty, but if the Great Ming Dynasty took the initiative to find trouble with them, then they could not blame him for fighting back. Yang Chendong naturally agreed to Yeshen's requirements. But at the same time, he also put forward his own requirements. For example, after the goods arrived, they had to pay immediately. They were not allowed to owe anything. This was the basic integrity of a businessman. Also, he did not allow anyone from Walla to have any ideas about his goods and caravan. Not only that, they also had the responsibility and obligation to ensure the safety of the caravan. If the goods were intercepted and the Walla could not give an explanation, then he would use the heavenly thunder again. At that time, it would not be as simple as exchanging captives. It could be imagined that under the irresistible heavenly thunder, it was unknown whether the Walla could survive. Each side put forward their own requirements, and in the end, the Economic Association came to a consensus. With this matter settled, Yes Hen excitedly left. Yang Chendong also turned and returned to the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. More than 70,000 Great Ming captives had been rescued. This would allow many broken families to be reunited. And all of this was because of Yang Chendong. On the way back, news of this matter would spread, causing these people to thank the loyalty marquis from the bottom of their hearts. This great hero who had saved them from fire and water, their great benefactor. The capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. The 12 city gates were opened, and the news spread to the capital. When the common people learned that more than 70,000 of their loved ones had been rescued, the streets were packed with people. They wanted to see if the rumors were true. And they also wanted to find their loved ones in the crowd. The first to enter the city were the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office. A total of 5,000 people, all of them holding their heads high and puffing out their chests, appeared to be in high spirits. In the past, they had played the role of maintaining law and order in the city. Most of the time, they were the thugs of some privileged classes and nobles, helping them bully the common people. It could be said that they were hated by the common people. But this time, it was completely different. He was returning to the city as a hero. Naturally, the welcome he received was extremely sincere and warm. When they saw the people on both sides of the road sincerely welcoming them, the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office were also moved. They suddenly realized that being a good person was far better than being a thug for evil people. After the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office entered the city, Yang Guang's 5,000 cavalry followed. In this battle, they did not fight a single battle with the Walla cavalry. They only used a single blade to obtain a complete victory. While obtaining military merits, each of them, like the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office, received some silver from the loyalty marquis. Ordinary soldiers received at least 10 taels of silver. The higher the official rank, the more they received. This kind of good job of obtaining both silver and merit made the 5,000 cavalry sincerely grateful to Yang Chendong. If not for the loyalty marquis, it was likely that they would not have been able to defend the capital and survive this time. After the 5,000 elite cavalry, it was the 75,000 Ming soldiers that entered the city. As soon as these people appeared, they were shocked. The scene became a little chaotic. There were too many people who saw their family members. Some saw their sons, some saw their husbands, and some saw their fathers. Immediately, there were waves of crying and shouting. Today was a day worth remembering for the capital. It was a day of triumphant return after winning the battle. It was also a day of joy and joy. Moreover, it was a day filled with cries of joy mixed with cries of joy. On the gate tower of the imperial city, Daizong Zhuqiu was standing there with the civil and military officials, watching the performance of the people in the city, watching the victorious army return to camp. There was a relaxed smile on everyone's face. Especially Daizong Zhuqiu. Ever since he ascended the throne, Walla was like a sharp sword hanging over his head, as if it would fall and stab him at any time. Because of this, he could not sleep at night and could not eat. It was as if he was afraid that one day he would be defeated like his brother, Daizong Zhuqiu. Now, Walla had retreated, and it was a very happy retreat. The battle report from the front said that they were retreating quickly. It was clear that they wanted to retreat to Walla's territory and did not want to be entangled with the Great Ming Empire anymore. Being able to retreat was already very difficult, let alone being able to retreat so cleanly and cleanly. This was extremely rare. This also showed how powerful Yang Chendong was. There were also battle reports that this time, the Great Ming Empire sent out more than 10,000 people and returned with no casualties. On the contrary, Walla's army suffered heavy losses. Even their leader, Yeshen's younger brother, Bai Luomao, was killed on the battlefield. To be able to obtain such a great victory with almost no losses, this loyalty marquis must be a very formidable commander. While Zhu Qiu was sighing at Yang Chendong's godlike leadership, he was also thinking about how to reward him. He won the battle, solved the threat in the capital, saved more than 70,000 captives, and brought peace to the Great Ming Empire. If he did not reward him for all these things, it was obviously impossible. The officials would not agree, the army would not agree, and the people would not agree. But what should he reward him for? After all, Yang Chendong was not even 20 years old, but he was already the loyal marquis of the Great Ming Empire. This had not happened even when the Great Ming Empire was founded. If he was rewarded, his official position would be too high. Would his achievements be greater than that of the town lord? Zhu Qiu's throne could not be said to be completely stable. He could not be looking for a powerful imaginary enemy for himself, right? Your Majesty, the Minister of War, Yi Ming, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have memorials. Just as Zhu Qiu was thinking about Yang Chendong, head eunuch Jin Ying placed a memorial in front of him. What is this? Zhu Qiu asked casually. He reached out to take the memorial and opened it. As soon as he read it, his eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. It was really like a pillow being sent to him when he was sleepy. This was a memorial that the officials had recommended to reward the loyal marquis. It said that Yang Chendong can be rewarded with the title of loyal marquis. His fief will be 5,000 mu of grain fields around the Yang family's old residence in Jianing Prefecture. This was a diversion of disaster. The so-called loyal marquis was nothing more than a title that represented his high rank. But that was it. Just like Duke Ing Zhangfu in the past, even though he was an official, he was still bullied and humiliated by eunuchs without daring to speak up. But no matter what, after being bestowed the title of duke, it would represent the emperor's regard for Yang Chendong. Presumably, this would be able to shut the mouths of the people in the world. As for the fief, it would be given to Jianing Prefecture. That place could now be considered Zhu Qijin's territory. Intentionally luring Yang Chendong, there was indeed the intention of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. But how could it not be a diversion of disaster? For this reason, Zhu Qijin would probably be hopping mad. Chapter 218. It could be said that this memorial was very much in line with Zhu Qiu's thoughts. He immediately approved the memorial. Using the red pen that Jin Ying had prepared, he approved it and the matter was settled. It was worth mentioning that Zhu Qiu had originally wanted to announce the edict in front of all the officials. However, Yang Chendong did not appear after winning the battle. Perhaps he wanted to keep a low profile. However, no one knew that he did not want to see Zhu Qiu. Otherwise, he would have to kneel and kowtow. With his current strength, there was no need for him to be so humble. Yang Chendong did not come to see the emperor. The imperial edict had to be announced by someone else. It just so happened that Jin Ying had some matters to discuss with him. She accepted the task and brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and young eunuchs to Yang Manor. The battle was over. Yang Chendong's goal had been achieved. Because of this, they were fortunate enough to follow the sixth young master to Yang Manor. By the time Jin Ying arrived, everyone was having a meal. When Yang Si, who was in charge of guarding, saw that it was Jin Ying and the others, he quickly reported the situation to Yang Chendong. They're here so quickly. Yang Chendong, who was drinking wine and eating meat with Lung Feng and the others, chuckled. He casually waved his hand and said, "Then why don't we invite them here to announce the edict?" A trace of worry flashed through Yang Si's eyes. Like a shadow, Tiger Mane, who followed beside Yang Chendong, knew what Yang Si was worried about. It was none other than Lung Feng. If they saw that their sixth young master had to kneel to someone else, it was inevitable that they would not be able to accept it and cause trouble. In fact, how could he not have such worries? However, since this was the sixth young master's intention, there was no room for doubt. He immediately glared at Yang Si and said, "If the young master tells you to go, then go. Why are you being so long-winded?" Yang Si saw that Tiger's Mane was angry. It was said that they were usually under this person's management. After a trace of panic appeared on his face, he agreed and left. Yang Chendong patted Tiger's Man's shoulder and gave him a look of approval and relief. Then he continued to drink with Lung Feng, Xiao Feng, Tung Shan, Wu Sheng, and the other company commanders as if he hadn't heard anything. Not long after, Jin Ying arrived. Along with him were 4 eunuchs and 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards. Usually, when a eunuch went to an official's house to deliver an edict, as the recipient of the edict, they had to prepare an incense table in advance in order to show their seriousness. Some even had to burn incense and bathe in the ceremony. But today, there was nothing prepared. Yang Chendong was still wearing his casual and elegant green robes. He didn't wear his official robes, and the incense table wasn't set up. When Jining saw this, she couldn't help but frown. But it was only a slight frown, and she quickly relaxed. It wasn't for any other reason than the fact that the Yang family square was filled with mercenary soldiers in camouflage uniforms. Although there were only 400 of them, their combat power was unimaginable. Even defeating Walla had been done with the help of their powerful strength. Against such people, Jining had no chance of winning at all. It wasn't just him. Even the 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards that he'd brought with him were on full alert. It wasn't that they were dissatisfied with Yang Chendong's lack of preparation before receiving the edict, but they were worried that these mercenaries would suddenly go on a rampage and hurt them. "Oh, it's Eunuch Jean. Come, have a drink with Marquis and the other meritorious officials." As soon as Jean Ying appeared, Yang Chendong secretly observed her reaction. He found that she was indeed a little displeased, but she quickly suppressed her displeasure. Yang Chendong smiled inwardly. He wanted to use this method to remind him that he wasn't an ordinary marquis. There were some rules that couldn't be applied to him. If something went wrong and he went on a rampage, everyone's face would be ruined. Yang Chendong greeted Jean Ying as if he were drunk. Jean Ying couldn't help but look a little embarrassed. He wanted to scold Yang Chendong for not following the rules, but he didn't dare do so in front of all the mercenaries. He could only comfort himself. They had just won a great battle, so it was only right that they celebrate together. There was no need to argue with someone who was drunk. "Loyal Marquis, the Emperor has an edict for you. Please kneel and receive it," Jean Ying said with a fake smile. He didn't directly respond to Yang Chendong's invitation to drink. Subconsciously, he seemed to be saying, "We aren't on the same side, so there's no need for us to drink together." There's another imperial decree, but His Majesty is going to reward this marquis again. Since he was drunk, it was not a problem for him to act a little wild. He immediately laughed and stood up. Perhaps it was because he had drunk too much, but when he stood up, he almost lost his balance. If not for Hu Mang, who was standing at the side, who was prepared and supported him, he would have fallen to the ground in an embarrassing manner. Yang Chendong, accept the edict." Yang Chendong shrugged his shoulders and shook off Hu Mang's arm that was on his body. With a plop, he fell to the ground, giving people the feeling that he was prostrating himself on the ground. Because of Jean Ying's appearance, all the mercenaries in the courtyard had stopped drinking and eating. The atmosphere had become much colder. But now, Yang Chendong had suddenly fallen to the ground and knelt to receive the edict. All the mercenaries stared coldly at Jean Ying and the other mercenaries. 10,000 swords piercing the heart was nothing more than this. At this moment, Jean Ying felt cold all over. It was as if he was walking in the snow without wearing anything. It was colder than that. It was a coldness that seeped into his bones. Jean Ying couldn't imagine why these mercenaries gave him such a terrifying feeling. Even as he panicked, he opened the Golden Dragon Edict with trembling hands. He read out the edict of acting patriarch Zhu Qizhen rewarding Yang Chendong with the title of Duke of Loyalty. This was a rare moment when he was absent-minded while reading an edict. But at this moment, Jean Ying was really afraid. When he read the edict, he stuttered. He finally finished reading the edict. But when he looked at Yang Chendong, his lips were slanted and he was snoring softly. It seemed that he had fallen asleep. Jean Ying didn't dare to be angry. Instead, he leaned forward with a gentle expression and said softly, "Duke of Loyalty, wake up. Wake up. I've finished reading the edict." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong seemed to have been startled awake. He opened his eyes and spoke. Then he rubbed his eyes and said to Jean Ying, "You've worked hard, Eunuch Jean. How about this? Please enter the hall and rest for a while. After Marquis has bathed, we can sit down together." Jean Ying had come here to have a good chat with Yang Chendong. Of course, he wouldn't refuse this opportunity. But he was very worried about whether Yang Chendong's mind was still clear. But no matter what, he had to agree. He noticed from the corner of his eye that the 400 mercenaries had already stood up and were looking at him with hostility. He couldn't guarantee that if he continued to stay here, he wouldn't be torn apart and eaten alive by these mercenaries. For his own safety, of course, entering the Yang family manor was the best choice. But since Duke of Loyalty is so kind, it would be impolite for me to refuse. With that, Jin Ing followed Beta Persei into the outer courtyard of the Yang family manor. Yang Chendong left with them, but he was heading towards the inner courtyard of the inner courtyard. He really did bathe and change his clothes. Just as Yang Chendong, Jin Ing, and the others left, someone among the 400 mercenaries shouted, "How can we allow others to blaspheme the 6th young master? We're going to seek justice from Emperor Ming." That's right, we want justice. In an instant, the anger in the hearts of many mercenaries was ignited. In their eyes, the 6th young master was a godlike existence. How could he kneel to others? When such a blasphemous thing happened, it naturally caused the crowd to be furious. It wasn't just the 400 mercenaries. Even Lung Song, Xiao Feng, and the other battalion commanders were furious. They looked like they would explode at any moment and cause trouble for Emperor Ming. Enough. Everyone, sit down. A loud roar came from Hu Mang's mouth. This time, he didn't leave with Yang Chendong. He had stayed behind to stabilize the situation, even though the two of them hadn't communicated before. But after interacting with each other for so long, they already had a tacit understanding. When Yang Chendong left just now, he had given him an inconspicuous look, which made Tiger's Man understand what to do next. With Tiger's Man's shout, all the mercenaries' gazes fell on him. But when they saw Chief Tiger's body tremble, the anger in their hearts seemed to have been extinguished. But because they were angry, they didn't sit down immediately. Well, if you don't listen to me, that means you don't listen to the 6th young master. Don't tell me you want to leave Cold Edge? Very well, if anyone wants to do that, step forward. I can do as you wish right now. Seeing that none of the mercenaries, including Lung Song and the other battalion commanders, sat down, Tiger's Man's eyes narrowed into slits. His anger was obvious. When they heard that they were going to be kicked out of Cold Edge, everyone's morale instantly dropped. Ever since they joined Cold Edge, there was a saying that followed them. Once in Cold Edge, always in Cold Edge. This was an honorable title that no one else had the right to take away. Unless they had committed a grave mistake, they wouldn't be kicked out of the meeting. But this someone else did not include the founder of Cold Edge, Yang Chendong, or the former head instructor, the current chief of the Security Bureau, Tiger's Man. Everyone who joined Cold Edge knew of the 6th young master, Yang Chendong. Similarly, there weren't many who didn't know of Chief Tiger's Man. It could be said that in the entire Yang Xianyu army, if Yang Chendong was the Nan Bowen, then the second place would definitely be Tiger's Man. This position was hard to replace, no matter how many contributions others made. For example, the only army commander, Lung Song, would feel inferior when he saw Tiger's Man. Chapter 219. Now, Hu Mang had spoken, and he was speaking with Lung Feng's qualifications and identity. How could the others dare to disagree? They immediately returned to their original stools with a rustling sound. Everyone quieted down, and Tiger's Mane's eyes revealed a satisfied expression. I know that you are very dissatisfied with Ming Emperor's actions towards the 6th young master. But please remember, why did the 6th young master do this? Isn't it to create more time for you to develop? Everyone was originally from the great Ming dynasty. To you, many of your relatives and friends live on this land. If the 6th young master did not compromise and chose to go to war with the Ming army, who knows how many innocent souls would have been implicated and died? Among them might have been your relatives and friends. If that was the case, is this an outcome that you want to see? Tiger's Mane asked the crowd in a powerful and resonant voice. Of course not. I think that no one wants to see their own people fight against their own people. In order to give us more time to develop, and in order to let more of the great Ming dynasty's people and Han descendants suffer less from the chaos of war, the 6th young master has been dealing with the Ming emperor in the capital. This is an act of sacrificing one's own family for the sake of everyone. I hope that everyone can understand. I also hope that today's matter will serve as a warning to all of you and give you a sense of urgency. If we can strengthen our strength earlier, then the sixth young master can avoid this punishment. Do you understand? Yes. Another uniform sound rang out, causing the ground of the entire courtyard to tremble. Very good, now let's continue eating. Tiger's mane saw that he did not disappoint the sixth young master and spoke of the sixth young master's good intentions. He could not help but inwardly sigh in relief, and then threw a glance at Commander Lung Song. Lung Song immediately expressed his understanding. With his cooperation with the 3 battalion commanders, the atmosphere in the courtyard became lively again. However, although everyone did not say anything else, they all felt a surge of energy in their hearts. That was to perform better so that the sixth young master could have the right to speak to Emperor Ming as an equal. In the side hall of the outer residence of the Yang family manor, Jining had just sat down when a loud roar came from outside the door, giving her a fright. Originally nervous, he immediately stood up. From the looks of it, he was ready to run away at any moment. On the other hand, Beta Persei, who was in charge of leading the way, did not panic at all when he heard the shouts outside. When he saw how nervous Jining was, he said nonchalantly, "It's fine. It's just a ritual for mercenaries to eat. You won't find it strange after hearing it so many times." Beta Persei's explanation made Jin Ying's body slowly relax. So that's how it is. This is really a strange rule. What kind of strange behavior is this? Yang Chendong, who had changed into a new green robe, strode in from the main entrance. At that moment, he didn't look drunk at all. Instead, he looked extremely spirited and sober. However, at this moment, Jining did not care so much. Since the decree had been announced, was there a need to hold on to the past and not let it go? Seeing Yang Chendong walk over, Jining laughed and stood up. "Congratulations, Duke of Loyalty." In the future, I can also call myself Duke of Loyalty, right? Yang Chendong laughed heartily as he walked to the main seat in the side hall and sat down. When he sat down, he pointed to the first seat on the left and said to Jining, "Eunuch Jin, you don't have to be so polite. Take a seat too." This action immediately caused Jin Ying's displeasure. Although he was only a eunuch, he was the head eunuch. However, he was the head of the eunuchs, the favorite of the emperor, and held great power in his hands. Usually, when he was with the other important officials, he would always be the first to sit before the others. At the very least, everyone had to be seated at the same time. This order of seating was not to be underestimated. It often represented the level of one's status. This was very particular. However, at this moment, Yang Chendong actually sat down first before allowing Jining to sit down. He did not even say a word of invitation. The dominance of the landlord was as clear as day. Jining was extremely displeased and looked around. When he noticed that there were only Yang Chendong and Beta Persei in the room, he thought that it would not be a loss of face if no one else saw him. Thus, he suppressed the anger in his heart and slowly sat down. Yang Chendong had deliberately neglected Jining in order to suppress the other party's power. Now, it seemed that everything was going smoothly. With a certain amount of authority, Yang Chendong began to negotiate with Jining. Although it was called a negotiation, it was actually a fight for benefits. According to his original plan, Yang Chendong proposed 3 conditions. First, the Yang family bank would officially open for business. After the capital, it would be promoted to the other major cities nearby. The imperial court would not be able to stop him, nor would it play any dirty tricks. In short, in the future, Yang Chendong would be a businessman, and a great one at that. If no one provoked him, he would not use his power to oppress others. Second, for his own personal safety. Of the 400 mercenaries, 200 would be left behind. 100 would be in the Yang family village and 100 would be in the capital to ensure the safety of the immortal abode, heaven beyond heaven, and the Yang family bank. In the future, he would decide according to the situation whether or not to continue hiring mercenaries. On this point, Yang Chendong showed that he was rich and imposing. Third, Yang Chendong would not attend court, nor would he participate in court politics. He would also not participate in the matters between Dai Zong and Ying Zong. He wanted to become a third party with a transcendent status. As for these three conditions, Dai Zong had already agreed to the first condition and had even said that he would deposit 500,000 taels of silver into the Yang family bank. There was no need to discuss it further. Jin Ying agreed immediately. As for the second condition, he could not doubt it either. The other party had money and could hire mercenaries, which could only make others envious. It was on the third condition that Jin Ying was dissatisfied with. She made a request on behalf of Dai Zong. That was, since he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he should be on the side of Dai Zong. I saved Ying Zong's life. It is impossible for me to completely cut off my relationship with him. Dai Zong has also treated me well. It is already not easy for him to not help either side. There is no need to say anything else. Yang Chendong shook his head and spoke with a resolute attitude. Jin Ying could see that Yang Chendong had no intention of backing down on these three conditions. After hesitating for a moment, she thought about how Walla had already retreated and did not need Yang Chendong to act for the time being. Since that was the case, not helping either side was not a bad choice. There was no harm in agreeing. But if she agreed, Jin Ying also raised three conditions. First, they would not help either side. Yang Chendong was only the Duke of Loyalty and had no other authority. Even his previous position as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards had to be removed. Since he was going to retire, he might as well retire completely. Second, Yang Chendong was not allowed to interfere with Dai Zong's relationship with the mercenaries. Jin Ying was very clear on this issue. He even said that he already knew that the Duke of Loyalty and the leader of the mercenaries had a good relationship. Jin Ying thought that after she said all this, Yang Chendong would at least look embarrassed and would even give an explanation. Unexpectedly, young Master Yang had no intention of speaking at all. Instead, he continued, "Let's talk about the third condition." The reason Yang Chendong did not care so much was naturally because he had purposely revealed everything that Jin Ying knew. Based on the fact that he had a good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was clear that Jin Ying was ignorant. In reality, it was not just a good relationship. They were the same person. All right, the third condition is that since you are a merchant, you have to pay business taxes. This is also a matter of course. Of course, the Great Ming Army and embroidered uniform guards who have received the money will also protect the Yang family's business. Jin Ying's face was full of smiles. She seemed to be saying that if you pay taxes, you will naturally be protected. If you don't pay taxes, then sorry, but don't come looking for us when someone causes trouble. Yang Chendong had already considered the matter of paying taxes. He had even thought of a countermeasure. However, since Jin Ying had brought it up, he still had to fight for the rights and benefits. Oh, then how does eunuch Jin intend to collect the taxes? The Great Ming's laws require that agriculture be taxed at a 30:1 ratio, Jin Ying said in a probing tone. This was the result of a discussion with the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, the Minister of War, Yi Ming, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu. The three ministers all agreed that if they wanted to curb Yang Chendong's development, they had to collect business taxes. In this way, not only could they obtain a large amount of money to fill the national treasury, but they could also hinder Yang Chendong's development. In the Grand Great Ming, there was actually someone who could earn money faster than the country. If they didn't use any methods to restrain him, it would be incredible. That's impossible. Yang Chendong shook his head straightforwardly. I will not accept a 30:1 ratio. Yang Chendong's reply was so straightforward that it immediately checkmated Jin Ying. His face was first filled with anger, angry that Yang Chendong's attitude was so resolute. But when he thought of the benefits that could be obtained from this matter, he immediately said, "Fine, then I don't know what the Duke of Zhongdan's opinion is. How much business tax should be collected?" Yang Chendong appeared to be deep in thought as he said, "Although the laws of the Great Ming don't stipulate it, in reality, the rich and powerful don't have to pay taxes when they do business. It's just like how scholars don't have to pay taxes when they farm. Right now, you want to collect business tax from me. No matter how much you pay, it's not appropriate, right?" How could Jin Ying not understand the logic behind this? however, who told other people to do business and farm to support their families, but Yang Chendong was using this to develop his power? For example, the mercenaries he had hired were 200 people. According to the standard rate, it would cost 2 million taels to hire them. Looking at the entire Great Ming, there was probably no one else other than Yang Chendong who could take out this amount of money so easily. Even the imperial family would feel heartache if they took out this amount of money. Chapter 220. Since he had made his business so big, what was the big deal about collecting a little tax? It's not the same. Jining said, aggrieved. How is it different? Yang Chendong didn't seem to notice Jin Ying's aggrieved expression. Instead, he fiercely retorted, could it be that because this guild is making money, you want to collect taxes from me? Could it be that because I did so much to protect the capital, you want to collect taxes from me? If that's the case, there's no way you can justify it, right? Then I, Yang Bao, have no choice but to ask the people of the world, where is justice? Where was Yang Bao's justice? Jin Ying's entire body trembled, his expression ugly. Only now did he realize that Wang Jin still had a powerful tool in his hands. Normally, even if the emperor's decree was announced to the world, it would still take time for the common people to learn of it. But Yang Bao was different. Wherever it appeared, the things recorded in it would quickly become known to all. He had even heard that in some places, when the local government had some rules, they would even use Yang Bao to spread the news. From this, one could see just how great his influence was. At this moment, Jining was inwardly cursing Wang Zhen for being a pig. How could he have made Yang Bao legal back then? Now, the drawbacks had appeared. Alas, Wang Zhen was already a dead man. Cursing him now had no effect. It was better to think about how to resolve the matter at hand. In any case, he couldn't allow Yang Chendong to speak of the grievances and unfair treatment he had suffered. Otherwise, it would be a major blow to Dai Zong's image. Duke of loyalty and courage? Then what do you think should be done? This duke doesn't ask for anything else. You can deal with the business tax as you see fit. Even if it's 20 to 10, 10 to 1, Marquis will accept it. After all, this is for the sake of the country. But there is one condition that must be fair, and that is that this duke's business must be taxed, as well as other merchants and nobles. Otherwise, don't blame me for falling out with you. Yang Chendong kept saying that he was willing to pay an enormous price for the sake of the country, but his last request left Jin Ying in a difficult spot. Yang Chendong was asking for fairness, and there was nothing wrong with this. However, if he really did that, he would offend countless influential people. In the past, when Zong was here, he only said that he wanted to collect taxes, but he never carried it out. What's wrong? Now that you've taken the throne and won the battle to defend the capital, you want to make an example out of the nobles and merchants? Isn't this a little too quick to get rid of the donkey the moment it outlived its usefulness? He thought that if he really took 30 to 1, he would lose the support of the people very quickly. Who knows how many people would go to Nanjing to seek refuge with Zong? This was not an outcome he wanted to see. However, they had no choice but to collect taxes. Originally, a country was divided into two, so the taxes would naturally be reduced by half. If they didn't think of other ways, once there was an emergency, it would be hard to say if there would be enough money to deal with it. Since they had to collect taxes, they could only think of a way based on the ratio. Jin Ying had originally believed that he could use this to suppress Yang Chendong, but who would have expected that he would end up shooting himself in the foot? He could only reply with an unsightly expression. Fine, we'll do as the Duke of Loyalty says. Everyone who does business must pay taxes, whether they're merchants or nobles. As for the tax rate, why don't we set it at 100 to 1? 100 to 1, this was indeed a very low rate. This was also because the resumption of the business tax required a buffer. But in reality, this was not a very low rate for merchants. Merchants valued profit, and this sort of action of plundering them would most assuredly arouse the opposition of many. But at this moment, Jin Ying did not have the time to consider such things. He only knew that if he did not reach an agreement with Yang Chendong, it would be even more difficult to raise the issue of collecting taxes in the future. Well said, well said. We'll do as Eunuch Jean says. As long as the other merchants pay the same taxes, I have no objections. Yang Chendong regained his smile, giving off the impression that he was very magnanimous. But Jin Ing knew very well that this was just for show. This was because once the matter became related to all the merchants in the world, it would be impossible to raise the taxes even if they wanted to. Jin Ing finally left, looking a little disheveled as he left. Although Yang Chendong was not even 20 years old, he gave Jin Ing the impression that he was a little fox. It was as if this person knew how to read and already knew what he was going to say. He had already prepared countless countermeasures. He was really worried that if he continued to stay here, he would accidentally fall into the other party's trap and would have to pay a certain price. Fortunately, the trip to Yangjia village was not completely fruitless. Putting aside the agreement he had reached with Yang Chendong, when he left the village, Jin Ing saw Lung Song, the leader of the mercenaries, waiting by the roadside. When he saw Lung Song standing by the roadside in his camouflage uniform, Jin Ing hurriedly stopped the sedan and welcomed him with a joyful expression. Oh, it's Leader Lung. I didn't know you were waiting here. I've kept you waiting. It's fine. Lung Song said expressionlessly, I've been waiting here for Eunuch Jin to fulfill my promise with you. Now that the war is over, when will the 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron that Emperor Ming promised be delivered? I've already prepared the advanced firearms that you requested. When he heard that the advanced firearms were already prepared, Jin Ying's face lit up with joy. Well said. The 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron have already been prepared. But how will we transport them out? That's simple. You can use the Yang family's commercial transportation system to transport them out. I've already discussed this with the Duke of Loyalty, Lung Song said. Hearing that this had already been arranged, Jin Ing nodded in agreement. All right, then I'll hand them over to the Duke of Loyalty. Oh, right, when will we be able to obtain the advanced firearms that Leader Lung mentioned? Knowing that this was what Jin Ing was concerned about, Lung Song said without hesitation, when the copper and iron are transported out of the capital, it will be time to hand over the advanced firearms. Oh, right, there's one more thing that needs to be discussed with Eunuch Jin. This time, we've repelled the Walla's army, but we've also communicated with them. We'll be doing business with the Walla and have handed this matter over to the Duke of Loyalty. We'll have to trouble Eunuch Jin to take care of this matter. Of course, once this matter is settled, if Eunuch Jin has any personal requests in the future, I'll put in a good word for you in front of our leader. Lung Song said this expressionlessly, but it was rather grating to Jin Ying's ears. Leader Leng, you're doing this for this eunuch's sake. The Walla just had a fierce battle with our great Ming. It doesn't seem right for us to be doing business with them now, does it? Of course it doesn't. That's why it's us mercenaries doing business with the Walla. It has nothing to do with your great Ming. We're just borrowing your path. What's wrong? Does Eunuch Jin have a problem with this? At the end of his speech, Lung Song's face became very serious, as if he was very angry. No, of course there's no problem with this eunuch here. It's just that this matter is too big. This eunuch still needs to report this matter to His Majesty and let His Majesty make a decision. Jin Ing wasn't foolish enough to offend the mercenaries, so she brought up Dai Zong's name. It's fine. This leader will still stay in the capital with my brothers for a few days, so we can listen to what your Ming Emperor has to say. But if Ming Emperor doesn't give us a satisfactory answer by the time we leave, then I'm sorry, but I can't guarantee that we won't accept the mission when someone else pays us money to deal with the great Ming. How could Lung Song not see that Jin Ing was delaying? Since that was the case, he took the initiative to propose a deadline. Jin Ing could tell that there was another meaning behind his words. Leader Ling, you mean that the mercenaries won't attack our great Ming? It's not that they won't attack, but that Ming Emperor has agreed to our conditions, so he will naturally take care of his business partners. Unless someone is willing to pay several times the price to deal with you, we won't accept the mission. Lung Song nodded and then shook his head. In short, he had thrown out the benefits, but he didn't say that he was dead set. Good. If that's the case, Ming Emperor should be able to agree. Jin Ing heard another meaning in his words. She had long heard of the high cost of hiring mercenaries. If it was several times the price, there probably weren't many people who could afford it. With these conditions, it shouldn't be difficult to convince Zhu Qiyu. Your Ming emperor should have agreed. Once Walla does business with us, their focus might shift. At that time, I'm afraid they won't have any designs on the Great Ming. Lung Song nodded as if he was giving her advice. Ji Ning nodded, then looked left and right. When she saw that there was no one around, she carefully moved in front of Lung Song and asked, "Leader Leng, since Walla can work with your army, can we work together?" Lung Song looked at Ji Ning alertly. "Eunuch Jin, I've said before that the Duke of Loyalty and our leader have a very good relationship. You shouldn't have such ideas. Even so, it's best that you don't say such things in the future. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, even I won't be able to bear it. Alright, I'll take my leave now." Lung Song left, leaving Ji Ning standing there alone. Her expression changed again and again. She had previously thought that Yang Chendong's relationship with the leader of the mercenaries was not bad. However, from the probing just now, it seemed that their relationship was far better than she had imagined. It seemed that it was best not to offend this Duke of Loyalty in the future. Chapter 221. The defense of the capital was a victory. Walla's army withdrew from the capital, from the territory that had once belonged to the Great Ming. Everything seemed calm once more, and the hearts of the people in the capital calmed down. Zhu Qiyu's position as emperor had been secured. With Zhu Qiyu's position secured, Zhu Qizhen became much more impatient. In the imperial palace of Nanjing, with Zhu Qizhen's entrance, the palace was filled with eunuchs and palace maids, and it was bustling with activity. Moreover, Nanjing had originally been the capital of the Ming dynasty, so it had been extremely prosperous, allowing the southern imperial court of the Great Ming to quickly establish itself. Many officials who had come from the capital were placed in important positions, and with the 6 bureaus in Nanjing, it didn't take long for the various departments to begin their normal operations. But Zhu Qizhen was not satisfied with all this, because he had just received news from the embroidered uniform guard. With Yang Chendong's intervention, the defense of the capital had been won, and Tile had retreated, allowing the Great Ming to once more return to peace. When Walla's army had approached the capital, many officials had analyzed that Zhu Qiyu would find it very difficult to defend the capital with the soldiers he had. And once the capital fell, Zhu Qiyu, the new emperor, would have nowhere to go, and the officials who followed him would naturally fall apart. Thus, it would be time for Zhu Qizhen to unify the world. At that time, he would immediately head north. If he could defeat Tile's army and take back the capital of the Great Ming dynasty, he would be able to completely erase the humiliation of Tu Mu's defeat. He might even become a famous sovereign of his generation. But before this dream could even begin, it was already over. When he learned that the capital had been saved and that Walla had retreated, Zhu Qizhen felt a suffocating feeling in his heart that made him extremely uncomfortable. "Your Majesty!" Chao Jixiang, the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, who was gradually grasping power and even replacing Wang Zhen, saw that Emperor Ying's complexion was extremely unsightly and softly asked, This call brought Zhu Qizhen's mind back to reality, and when he saw that it was Chao Jixiang who had called him, he couldn't help but ask, "Does Great Companion have something to say?" Zhu Qizhen addressed Chao Jixiang as Grand Partner, just like how he addressed Wang Zhen as Mr. It had to be said that a leopard couldn't change its spots. In the Battle of Tuma Fortress, he was implicated by Wang Zhen and suffered a lot. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong's timely intervention, he would have become a captive. However, after he became the emperor again, he still put the eunuchs around him in important positions. Perhaps he was used to it. Perhaps this was the rule of the Ming dynasty. Only by using eunuchs in important positions could the emperor enjoy the right to speak. "Your Majesty, the Count of Loyalty played an important role in the defense of the capital, and his appearance ruined Your Majesty's plans. Your Majesty, do you want this subject to send someone to the capital? As long as something happens to him and the news is sent to the Walla, it probably won't be long before they attack the border again, and Your Majesty's chance will come." Chao Jixiang had not forgotten the humiliation he had received from the Yang family guards outside the Yang family manor. He had been looking for an opportunity to take revenge. Zhu Qizhen was really moved for a moment. His wish was to reunite the great Ming dynasty, and Yang Chendong had undoubtedly become a strong wall, blocking his dream. If something happened to this person, the situation would probably change very quickly. In this way, his chance might really appear. His heart was moved, but he concluded that last time he only listened to Wang Zhen and did not listen to the words of the officials. This time, Zhu Qizhen learned his lesson and did not immediately express his opinion. He only nodded and said, "How about this? Call the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, I have something to ask him." Chao Jixiang knew that the emperor had listened to his words. He must have called Kuang Yi to ask about the feasibility of the matter. After he agreed, he turned and walked out. He personally went to Kuang Ye's residence to pass on the decree. Although the new palace had just been built, there were many eunuchs who followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing. At least, things like passing on the decree did not require the head eunuch to do it personally. However, Chao Jixiang still came. When he appeared in Kuang Ye's residence, the Minister of War was really shocked. "Minister Kuang, the emperor has summoned you to the palace. He has something to ask you, please." After seeing Kuang Yi, Chao Jixiang tried his best to show an acceptable smile. Ever since Wang Zhen's incident, Kuang Yi and the other important officials, especially those who had survived the Tuma rebellion, had always hated eunuchs. This time, when they saw Chao Jixiang personally come to pass on the decree, they were also unhappy. However, since the emperor had a decree, they had to obey. He changed into an official's robe and followed Chao Jixiang and the others out of Kuang Ye's residence. However, just as they left the residence, Chao Jixiang changed his expression and walked up to them and said in a low voice, "Minister Kuang, this time the emperor wants to ask about the matter of Count Zhongdan Yang Chendong. This eunuch suggests to the emperor to get rid of this person and cut off one of Prince Cheng's arms. Minister Kuang, please be careful with your words." After saying this, Chao Jixiang turned and walked into his palanquin. He had already reminded Kuang Yi, and he believed that Kuang Yi would know what to say. He left Kuang Yi alone in his palanquin and thought about the cause and effect of this matter with a grave expression. Yang Chendong had saved Kuang Ye's life. If they were officials in the same court, they should have been very close. However, because Prince Cheng became the Daizong, he came to Nanjing to be an official. Two emperors ruling at the same time. It sounded like a simple sentence, but there were too many things involved in it. Take Yang Chendong for example. As the Minister of War, Kuang Yi had his own sources of information. He already knew that this person was first given the title of Marquis Zhongdan, and then given the title of Duke Zhongdan for his great service in the defense of the capital. However, Chao Jixiang still called him Count Zhongdan. From this, it could be seen that some of the decrees of the Daizong were not accepted by the Ingzong. They used to be officials in the same court, but now that they were serving different masters, the relationship between them had become a big problem. Kuang Yi had expected that they would meet on the battlefield sooner or later, but he had not expected it to come so quickly, and the first person to be his savior, Yang Chendong. Not to mention that Yang Chendong couldn't be repaid for saving his life, he couldn't let anything happen to Yang Chendong now. Otherwise, Ingzong might not be able to stabilize his position in Nanjing. He had just resettled his home in Nanjing, and he might have to move again. No matter how he thought about it, it seemed impossible. In the palanquin, Kuang Yi made up his mind. By the time he reached the imperial palace, Kuang Yi had already made up his mind. After entering the palace and seeing the Ingzong, he first kneeled and bowed before slowly getting up. "Beloved official Kuang, you should have heard that we won the defense of the capital. Right now, the capital must be very lively, and everyone should be celebrating." As soon as he saw Kuang Yi, Ingzong's face showed a sorrowful expression. He seemed to remember the scene where everyone escaped from the Tuma castle under the protection of Yang Chendong and the mercenaries he hired. The Duke of Zhongdan blocked the entrance of the Wala and guarded the northern gate of the great Ming dynasty, giving us more time to recruit, and manage the soldiers. It is a blessing for the country. Kuang Yi said these high-sounding words while paying attention to Zhu Qizhen's expression. Hearing Kuang Yi praise Yang Chendong like this, Zhu Qizhen's face showed a trace of displeasure. The Duke of Zhongdan saved the emperor and is an important official that I rely on. But why did he stay in the capital in the north and not come back? Now, he helped King Yu block the Walla and made his name known all over the world. Isn't this going against me? Because of this, someone advised me to invite the Duke of Zhongdan to Nanjing. If he doesn't agree, we can use extreme measures. Beloved official Kuang, what do you think? When he asked this question, Zhu Qizhen's eyes shone with a cold light, as if he wanted to see through Kuang Ye's heart at this moment. Fortunately, Kuang Yi was prepared. After hearing Zhu Qizhen's words, he did not panic. Instead, he pretended to be deep in thought, first nodding and then shaking his head. Beloved official, what do you mean? Seeing Kuang Yi nod and shake his head, Zhu Qizhen was confused for a moment. Your Majesty, in this official's view, it is not impossible to invite the Duke of Zhongdan to Nanjing, but I'm afraid that he won't be willing to come. The immortal abode, heaven beyond heaven, and I heard that King Yu promised him to set up a bank of the Yang clan in the capital. With so many transactions, I really don't dare to think that he will give them up. As for forcing him to come, I'm afraid that the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards won't be able to do it. Your Majesty, please don't forget that the Duke of Zhongdan has the world's most elite mercenaries at his side. If this is done and it doesn't happen in the end, it will be equivalent to offending the Duke of Zhongdan. This official asks Your Majesty, are you ready to fall out with King Yu now? As soon as Kuang Yi opened his mouth, he suddenly asked a few questions, which stunned Zhu Qizhen. He asked suspiciously, Beloved official, what do you mean? Why do you invite the Duke of Zhongdan to fall out with King Yu? Seeing that Zhu Qizhen began to follow his train of thought, Kuang Yi pretended to be very excited and said, Your Majesty, think about it. What is the reason why we can coexist peacefully with King Yu now? Isn't it all because of the mediation of the Duke of Zhongdan in the capital? If something happens to him, there will be no barrier between us and King Yu. Now that the Walla has retreated, King Yu may gather all his forces to deal with us. Even now, the surrounding guards are not all controlled by us. As the Minister of War, this official does not dare to tell Your Majesty that the number of troops we can fight now is less than 50,000. According to the information he had received, 80,000 soldiers from the Bureau of Imperial Guards had been dispatched to the capital to rescue the emperor. If these people suddenly turn around and attack Nanjing, this official can't guarantee that we can win the battle. Chapter 222. There was no need for Kuang Yi to say anything else. He believed that Zhu Qizhen would be able to figure it out. Sure enough, when Ying Zong said this, his expression changed again and again. Perhaps it was because of the defeat at the Tuma fortress, but he was still traumatized by war. He was truly afraid when he heard about it. Furthermore, with Kuang Ye's analysis, how could he still think about touching Yang Chendong? Not only that, he also had to ensure the safety of this person so that he could act as a barrier between him and King Yu. Good, I will remember Minister Kuang's words. It was I who did not think it through. Zhu Qizhen seemed like a completely different person. He was completely different from the emperor who had a murderous look in his eyes. Seeing this, Kuang Yi finally calmed down. This time, not only did he want to repay Yang Chendong for saving his life, he also did not have the confidence to do anything to this loyal duke. Think about it, even the elite cavalry of the Walla were defeated by this person. How could he be so easy to deal with? If he couldn't touch the other party, he would be provoked to point the saber at Nanjing. If that was the case, he was afraid that this time he really had nowhere to hide. Whether it was to repay the debt of gratitude or for himself. Kuang Ye's words completely dispelled Zhu Qizhen's thoughts about Yang Chendong. At this moment, Yang Chendong in the capital did not know that someone wanted to kill him. Of course, even if he knew, he might not care. With Lung Feng and the others in charge of his safety, he did not take any assassination seriously. 4 days had passed since the Walla retreated. Today was the day that the mercenaries retreated. With Lung Song as the leader and battalion commander Xiao Feng as the second, the two of them led the 200 mercenaries of the 1st and 2nd companies out of the capital. The ones left behind were the 3rd company led by Teng Shan and the 4th company led by Wu Sheng. These two people were left behind to replace Xiaofeng. This was because Yang Chendong intended to promote them. By his side, he could learn more things. In the future, when the system grew stronger and needed more high-ranking officers, there would not be a situation where there was no one to replace them. When Commander Leng Song left, he took with him the 1 million tons of copper and iron that Dai Zong had given him. For this matter, he had hired several thousand commoners to push the carts out of the capital. After paying so much, Dai Zong received an item and a promise. The object was a Type 81 rifle and 30 rounds of ammunition. The promise was a guarantee that the mercenaries would not easily attack Dai Zong. After paying so much, all he got in return was a gun and a guarantee. In the eyes of others, it seemed like he had lost out, and it was a huge loss. But in Dai Zong's eyes, it was worth it. With the first advanced firearm, with the ability of the Great Ming Empire's firearms department, they should be able to make a second one. Once he had this kind of advanced firearm, he would not be far from running amok in the world. He would be able to reunite the Great Ming Empire. A guarantee was equally important. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about others using mercenaries to deal with him. In order to obtain all of this, he only had to pay 1 million tons of copper and iron that he wouldn't be able to use in a short period of time. Of course, it was worth it. Perhaps this was what it meant to turn waste into treasure. Dai Zong was still in a state of ecstasy. He ordered people to hurry up and develop the Type 81 assault rifle so that they could produce results as soon as possible and benefit from it. At this time, the Yang Family Bank, which was opposite the Immortal Residence and Sky Beyond Sky, had opened for business. Since it was Dong Shuai who made the move, it would definitely be extraordinary. 3 days ago, the Yang Family Bank had started to advertise the opening of the bank. There was a large introduction of the bank's function, and it promised that if money was deposited in the bank, one would be able to obtain extremely high interest rates. At the same time, it also sent out an invitation to ambitious businessmen who wanted to do business but lacked money. As long as you had something, whether it was land or houses, you could use it as collateral. Even if you didn't, you could also borrow money from the bank through a joint guarantee from 5 households. It also introduced the interest rates for depositing money in detail and also talked about some ways for people to borrow money. When the Yang Family Bank released the advertisement, it instantly attracted the attention of many people. In particular, the advertisement also said that in the first 3 days of the bank's opening, as long as someone deposited money, they would be given all kinds of small gifts. The more money they deposited, the better the gifts would be. For example, some people didn't have much extra money in their family and could only deposit 2 taels of silver at most. But even so, they could still receive a packet of toilet paper. The market price of this item was at least 2 taels of silver. In this way, it was equivalent to receiving 2 taels of silver for free. As for the 10 families with the highest savings, each of them would be given a divine object mirror. The first family would also receive 5 sets of extremely exquisite glass cups. Whether it was given away or sold, these were all extremely popular goods. With these as a catalyst, on the morning of the Yang Family Bank's opening, there was a crowd that blocked the nearby streets. Fortunately, there were people from the warden's office of the 5 cities here to take care of security, so there weren't any accidents. But when the time came, many people wanted to rush into the bank to deposit their money. There were also some people who stood outside the door to watch. Suddenly, the black cloth covering the Yang Family Bank was pulled away. Waves of golden light blinded many people's eyes. Originally, when they saw that the exterior of the Yang Family Bank was covered with a black cloth, some people thought that it was like the opening of the immortal abode. They thought that the exterior should be covered with glass, which made it look bright and transparent, and also made it look high-end and classy. But who knew that the moment the black cloth was removed, there was indeed a thick glass, but inside the glass, there was an uncountable amount of gold that couldn't be calculated. With so much gold placed together, it emitted the color of brass. Under the illumination of the sun, coupled with the reflection of the sun, it flashed a golden light, giving people the feeling that they were looking at a mountain of gold. Just as everyone was still shocked by the scene in front of them, Yang Chendong personally appointed the general manager of the Yang family bank, his cousin Yang Fu, with a big belly, walked out under the protection of two men in camouflage uniforms. With a big belly and a kind smile, Yang Fu was now a person who had experienced big scenes. Back when he was in Jianing, it was only because he trusted Yang Chendong that he sponsored a few times and cooperated with him a few times. Who knew that he would earn more and more money, and his value would also increase. Later on, when he came to the capital with Yang Chendong and managed the immortal abode in heavens beyond heaven, he increased his knowledge. In the past, when he saw a rank 7 official in Jianing, his legs would tremble. Now, even if he saw a duke, a marquis, a count, or a rank 2 or 3 official in the imperial court, he could still act very naturally. It was because of Yang Fu's ability and his ability to adapt to changes in the environment that Yang Chendong handed the heavy responsibility of the general manager of the bank to him this time. At this moment, Yang Fu was like the Minister of Finance, controlling this business giant wheel. It could be seen that as long as Yang Fu didn't have any other thoughts and was able to follow in Yang Chendong's footsteps, his future achievements would be limitless. The moment Yang Fu stood out, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Enjoying the attention of everyone, Yang Fu stood there for more than 10 breaths without saying a word. However, when the crowd quietened down because of his appearance, he coughed heavily and pointed forward. Everyone, do you see that? The Yang family bank has sufficient gold and silver. This is where our confidence lies, and it is also a way to protect our depositors. You don't have to worry about whether your money will be wasted if you deposit it in the Yang family bank, because we have this gold as a guarantee. If you can't get your money back, then this gold will be yours. Everyone will make a profit and won't lose anything. Okay, we want to deposit money, we want to deposit money. The supporters, who had been hiding in the crowd, immediately shouted loudly. At the same time, they raised various amounts of silver and squeezed forward. It gave people the feeling that if they were a step late, they wouldn't have the chance to deposit money. The crowd was excited, and those who held the silver couldn't wait any longer. At this moment, there was no need for Yang Fu to make a long-winded speech, nor was there a need for him to instigate anything. The result was obvious. Satisfied, he turned around and walked into the bank. Following him was the army of savings behind him. In order to ensure that the business was done smoothly, they didn't let people wait for too long and showed efficiency. The entire Yang family bank took up a total of 3,000 square meters. With just this one move, they had to open up 5 or 6 large shops in succession before they could complete the task. It was all thanks to the previous battle that the capital was in a state of panic. This was why Yang Chendong was able to buy these properties at a cheap price. Now, they were all put to good use. In the 3,000 square meter hall, there were a total of 20 counters for depositing and withdrawing money, and 20 large bulletproof glasses were placed there. There were many bulletproof glasses in the warehouse that were prepared for important headquarters and vehicles. This time, Yang Chendong took out some of them. Since this was a bank, when it came to dealing with money, it couldn't be too much to guard against. In short, Yang Chendong wanted to show that not only could he guarantee his own safety, he also wanted to make sure that the scene was grand, so that every depositor could feel at ease and at ease. The red ropes leading to the 20 counters had been tied in advance to ensure that each passage was orderly, and there were enough drinks on the side of the passage. Although the ingredients were far inferior to those sold in the immortal abode, this was still the first time the common folk had tasted something so good. For a moment, the demand for the drinks couldn't meet the demand. The hall was bustling with activity, with people coming and going. However many people went out, they would let in as many people as they wanted to, so that there would always be at least 500 customers in the hall. But even the depositors who had deposited money left empty-handed. It seemed extremely relaxed, but at the very least, it was completely different from when they had arrived with money in their hands and arms. But in reality, they were already carrying banknotes of various denominations. Chapter 223. These banknotes were made of carefully selected coin paper. A picture of a soaring dragon was printed on it, and the colors were balanced. More importantly, these banknotes not only had words on them to prevent counterfeiting, but they were also reprinted and suppressed. On the surface, it was impossible to see. Only when one touched it with their hands could they feel the uneven existence. And all of this was made by Yang Chendong, who first found a lot of materials in the large warehouse. Then he gave them to the munitions factory and printing factory in Chichen City to jointly produce good things. Many of the processes could not be done by one person, so it was equivalent to an additional safe process. In addition, some of the processes were only available in the large warehouse. As a result, it was impossible for others to forge them. And Yang Chendong firmly believed that with his arrival and the advanced knowledge he brought, science would develop step by step. The gap between the current level of science and technology would only grow bigger and bigger. It would be even harder for others to find an opportunity to catch up and surpass. There were free drinks to drink, free gifts to receive, and countless amounts of gold as guarantees. In addition to the light and simple banknotes, the Yang family bank became popular on the first day. It opened until the sky turned dark, and when it had to be forced to close, it had already absorbed a total of 7 million taels of silver. The good news was quickly sent to the Yang family manor 15 li south of the city. Without the danger of war, the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, returned here. For him, it was more reassuring to not live in a territory controlled by others. Without the threat of war, Yang Chendong spent the past few days with Hu Yan and Xiao Yin in addition to dealing with his daily work. In Hu Yan's words, Lu Lang was not young anymore. Her older brother and some of her friends had already become fathers when they were at his age. Since he had such a large family property, of course, he had to have enough people to carry on. So, after discussing with Xiao Yin, he pestered Yang Chendong every day when he was free, in order to give birth to the next generation as soon as possible. Yang Chendong really didn't understand. He was less than 20 years old. Why was he in such a hurry to have a child? His parents' bodies hadn't fully developed yet. What was the benefit of having a child in a hurry? Fortunately, Lady Shui and Lady Xiang were busy with their work. They were arranging the scene where the god of war Yang Chendong defeated the Walla's army. Besides, people who worked in the arts did not want to have children too early. Otherwise, their bodies would change. With two less people, Dong Shui could calmly deal with the two women. When Yang Si excitedly reported the good news of the 7 million yuan deposit in Yang Chendong's bank to his master, Yang Chendong, he was being fed dinner by Hu Yan and Xiao Yin. Yang Chendong was also shocked when he heard that the daily savings was 7 million taels. Ah, good. It looks like the people of the great Ming dynasty really are rich. How about this? We have to strike while the iron is hot. Notify everyone that in the future, anyone who uses banknotes in the immortal abode or realm beyond heaven will be able to enjoy a 5% discount. Yang Chendong was stunned for a moment, but quickly reacted. He decided to add fuel to the fire. It would be best if he could get all the money in the hands of the great Ming dynasty's people, merchants, and nobles. If everyone used banknotes, then without him, the great Ming dynasty's economy would be crippled. At that time, who would dare to touch him? Yang Si left. He was excited when he came, but he was also excited when he left. After he left, Hu Yan, who was feeding him, asked with a puzzled expression, "Sixth brother, what do we need so much money for? We even have to get a 5% discount. Who knows how much less income we'll get?" "Ha, housekeeper, you're quite competent." Yang Chendong smiled and scratched the bridge of Hu Yan's nose. This was his signature gesture of intimacy with his woman. Seeing that even Hu Yan was starting to care about the business, Yang Chendong wasn't displeased at all. Instead, he said with an encouraging tone, "Using money to make transactions is really too wasteful. If this thing is passed around for a long time, it will wear and tear. That's equivalent to wasting an infinite amount of money. In addition, it's too heavy to make transactions. Sixth brother, you're doing a good deed to reduce everyone's losses. As for ourselves, didn't you say that we already have a lot of money? Doing something for the common people is something we should do." His words were dignified and righteous. Yang Chendong didn't explain that the difference in the price of silver and the quality of the silver would be the source of the profits for the Yang Bank. He also didn't say that he wanted to use this method to control the great Ming dynasty's economy. Although they were married, there were some things that he didn't want to hide from them. He was just afraid of scaring them. If he really told them about his ambition, it was possible for Hu Yen to faint from fright. Before he had enough strength or showed enough signs, Yang Chendong didn't want to scare his women and make them worry about him. All the pressure would be shouldered by himself. This was what a man should do. With Yang Chendong's decision, the news quickly spread the next day. For a time, the merchants who were still hesitating whether to deposit money in the bank were shaken. They took all the liquid funds and began to deposit in the Yang Bank, causing the turnover of the next day to exceed 8 million taels. In just 2 days, a total of 15 million taels of silver had been deposited. This was undoubtedly a major event that shook the world. Even the acting sect master, Zhu Qizhen, was shocked by this. In fact, such a result wasn't unexpected. First, the people of the Great Ming dynasty who had just experienced the rule of Renxian still had some money in their hands. Second, the business strategy and promotion were in place. Third, the discount was enough. In addition, the reputation of the East Marshal had always been very good. Opposite him were his businesses, immortal residence, and sky beyond sky. The traffic there directly affected people's judgment and trust in him. Not to mention, he also had the support of the emperor. Zhu Qiyu had deposited 500,000 taels of silver. The other ministers followed suit. Naturally, this amount wasn't that shocking. But when the situation was reported to Zhu Qiyu, he was still shocked. 15 million taels. This was close to half of the Great Ming dynasty's national treasury. This wealth belonged to one person. How could he not be shocked? The original Great Ming dynasty's national treasury had experienced the efforts of several generations of monarchs. There was indeed some savings. However, the Great Ming dynasty lost the Battle of Tumu and lost a lot. Later, when the two emperors ruled together, Emperor Yingzong took away some of the money. In addition, they spent a lot of money to hire mercenaries. Over time, they were only spending money. It was no wonder that the amount of money in the national treasury was gradually decreasing. In the palace, Zhu Qiyu made a difficult decision. Notify the Ministry of Revenue to calculate and collect the business tax. Disregarding everything else, just how much money could they earn from the Yang clan's bank every year with a business tax of 100 to 1? With this as bait, Dai Zong couldn't help but be tempted. He had no choice but to use some methods. Although doing so would offend some merchants and nobles, and would even cause some people to be dissatisfied, this was the only way to replenish the national treasury. Jining knew what the consequences of the emperor's decision would be, but seeing how Yang Chendong was earning so much money, they couldn't just do nothing. The country had always relied on collecting taxes to survive, and this was a matter of course. Thus, they didn't raise any objections and went to the Ministry of Revenue to pass down the decree. As the new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian had always wanted to make some achievements, but he had never had a suitable opportunity. Now that the business tax had appeared, he knew that his opportunity had come. He immediately led a group of subordinates and quickly came up with some regulations. In just a few days, the details of the business tax were announced in the capital. Once the business tax was announced, and it was done so quickly, it immediately attracted the dissatisfaction of many merchants. How could anyone who could become a merchant be an ordinary person? Either he was smart, or he had a strong background. Collecting the business tax was tantamount to touching their interests. Because of this, an unexpected guest had come to the Yang clan manor. It wasn't exactly an unexpected guest. This person was Dong Shuai's relative, his sixth brother-in-law, Bai Peng. When his sixth sister, Yang Qin, had married into the Bai clan, the Yang clan had been in a period of decline. The status of a merchant wasn't high, and the marriage alliance had been looked down upon. However, in order to support the Yang clan, Yang Qin had resolutely chosen to marry into the Bai clan. At that time, she had indeed exchanged for a lot of money, which had helped the Yang clan for a period of time. Yang Qin had sacrificed so much, but her brothers and sisters didn't understand. Fortunately, Bai Peng and Yang Chendong had a good relationship, and they loved each other dearly. At the very least, he hadn't taken in a concubine yet. This had also gained Yang Chendong's approval. When it came to collecting goods in heavens beyond heaven, others couldn't, but the Bai clan had benefited greatly. And this time, Bai Peng had taken the initiative to come. Needless to say, he was here to discuss the imperial court's plan to collect the business tax. He had represented the majority of the merchants in the capital in coming to seek advice from Dong Shuai. He wanted to see if there was any good way to deal with it. Since his sixth brother-in-law had come, Yang Chendong naturally couldn't refuse to meet him. Not only did he meet him, he even met him in his own study. From this, one could see how solemn he was. Upon seeing Yang Chendong, even though he was his sixth brother-in-law, Bai Peng still respectfully greeted him. Duke Yang. All right, sixth brother-in-law, there's no need for you to call me Duke. Just call me Dong Shuai or sixth young master. Yang Chendong, who didn't like such formalities, chuckled and invited Bai Peng to sit across from him. All right, Dong Shuai. The imperial court's tax collection this time is clearly aimed at us merchants. With a ratio of 100-to-1, how much money will we have to pay in that year? We merchants are all opposed to it. Since they were relatives, there was no need to beat around the bush. Bai Peng raised the doubts in her heart. Yang Chendong savored the fragrant tea in his hand as he looked at Bai Peng. So they sent you here to make me stand up against the imperial court? Chapter 224. No. Seeing that Yang Chendong saw through his intention at a glance, Bai Peng hurriedly showed a flattering smile and said, "We don't want to go against the imperial court, but this move is too ruthless. As the leader of the merchants, Dong Shuai should represent us and argue with them." Hearing that he had become the leader of the merchants, a title that even he didn't know, Yang Chendong suddenly laughed and said, "Leader? Sixth brother-in-law, don't make fun of me. I am also the Duke of Loyalty and Courage personally conferred by the Emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty. I am also a minister of the imperial court. How can I find trouble with them?" It's not the same. Dong Shuai, who doesn't know that Walla retreated because of you, but now? They just conferred you the title of Duke and left you at home. This is clearly getting rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. We are all saying that it is unfair for Dong Shuai. Suddenly, the teacup was put on the table heavily. Enough. Yang Chendong's face suddenly turned cold and he said in an icy voice, "Sixth brother-in-law, this duke saw that you are my brother-in-law, so I gave you face and listened to you. However, there are some things that cannot be discussed in private. Well, I am sleepy, please go back." Yang Chendong made a gesture of sending him off, and then without waiting for Bai Peng to say anything, he got up and walked to the bedroom in the backyard. It was obvious that Bai Peng was being used by someone to ask him to speak for the merchants. If they won, the merchants would naturally get benefits. Even if they lost, the unlucky ones would only be him who resisted, and those people would still be fine. It was really unexpected that Bai Peng would be willing to do such a thing. Yang Chendong suddenly left the table, and Bai Peng's face was bitter. Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, stretched out his hand and said politely, "Boss Bai, please." Bai Peng left with some disappointment. Not long after he returned to the capital, rumors began to spread that the newly made Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong, was also afraid of the imperial court. Just like Zhang Fu, who had died for his country after being made Duke of Ying, he had become a coward. Even if someone went to the Yang Manor to ask for an explanation about the imperial court's business tax collection, he didn't dare to stand out and fight for it. Even Yang Chendong, who had an uncountable amount of silver, approved of the imperial court's actions. For a moment, the other merchants had nothing to say. They had no choice but to consider the matter of paying the taxes. Once the news came out, it quickly spread to the palace. When Jean Ying received the report from the secret agent of the Brocade Guard, she was overjoyed. This Duke of Loyalty is a man of his word. He promised me before and he can fulfill his promise very well. However, in this way, his status in the eyes of the merchants will be greatly reduced. If there is a chance to take care of this person, I don't think there will be many people who will speak up for him. Jean Ying was overjoyed. At the same time, she waved her hand to summon a trusted eunuch and said, "Go, tell Commander Lugui that there are some things that can be taken care of." In a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the capital, weeds that were half the height of a man grew everywhere. Even though the weather was getting colder, the weeds still hadn't withered. They displayed their strong vitality. In the temple, weeds, and the occasional chirping of an unknown bird in the sky. This place gave off a desolate feeling. Logically speaking, there should be no signs of human habitation. However, 3 miles away from the temple, there were more than 100 people dressed in black. They were almost the same height. Their eyes were cold and indifferent. They were like human-shaped machines, without the slightest hint of emotion. They were the East Faction Guards. Because it was located to the north of Dong and Gate, now East Faction Alley in the north of Wangfujing Street, it was named the East Faction Guards. The function of the East Faction Guards was to investigate and defy evil and share power with the embroidered uniform guards. Relatively speaking, the East Faction Guards and the embroidered uniform guards didn't belong to each other. However, because the embroidered uniform guards were established by Ming Qingzu and Zhu Di, and only those who weren't strong enough could enter, their overall quality was higher than the embroidered uniform guards. Over time, they had a feeling that they were above the embroidered uniform guards. Of course, the East Faction Guards couldn't order the embroidered uniform guards around. Similarly, the embroidered uniform guards couldn't order the East Faction Guards around. They each had their own authority and did different things that belonged to them. But this time, 100 East Faction protectors had suddenly appeared. Such a big battle formation was just to besiege a rundown temple. From this, it could be seen that there must be someone important here. The 100 East Faction Guards dressed in black walked forward with light steps. They tried their best not to make any noise as they walked. However, there were too many people. With so many people, it was inevitable that they wouldn't make any noise. For example, one of them accidentally stepped on a withered branch and made a slight cracking sound. Once the sound was heard, the other guards nearby all looked over. Then, the leader shook his head. Although the sound was soft, it was equivalent to exposing the target of their encirclement. Attack together. Surround this place. Don't let him escape. After the leader called out softly, the 100 Eastern Faction Guards immediately sped up and formed a huge encirclement around the small temple. The 100 men in black stopped at almost the same time. They stared at the small temple in front of them that didn't make any noise. They didn't move for a long time. They stood there for the time it took for a stick of incense to burn. When the atmosphere reached its peak, the leader raised his hand. A small crossbow appeared in the hands of all the men in black. They aimed at the only exit of the small temple. "Lord Ji, you've already been surrounded. I know you have some tricks up your sleeve, but can you face 100 of us alone? If you don't come out, we'll have to set fire to the temple." The leader stared straight at the entrance of the small temple. During this process, he didn't even dare to blink. His voice spread out, and in the quiet little temple, it was very clear and bright. As his voice rang out, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from the originally silent small temple. Chen Guan must have been unable to hold himself back and spilled the beans. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to find this place. His laughter was very bright and clear. In an instant it spread far and wide. When the leader of the black-robed men heard this, a faint smile appeared on his face. Chen Guan hadn't lied. Ji Guang really was here. Ji Guang, the former commander of the embroidered uniform guards, was a 4th-rank official. At the same time, he was Wang Zhen's trusted aide. Ever since Wang Zhen was killed in front of the Tuma Castle, Ji Guang had disappeared. Along with him, the money and wealth that Wang Zhen had obtained through various means over the years had disappeared. Jin Ying, who had regained power, didn't care that much about Ji Guang's disappearance. However, he couldn't accept the fact that the treasure had disappeared as well. It was the same at any time. If you wanted to succeed, you needed money first. Only when those who followed you benefited from it would more and more people would gather. Since Ji Guang had disappeared along with the treasures, no one would believe that they had nothing to do with it. If they found Ji Guang, they might be able to find out where the treasure was buried. For this matter, Jin Ing was very attentive. He even found a random reason to take down the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Chen Guan. Chen Guan was also one of Wang Zhen's trusted aides. He was also in charge of the Imperial Horse Directorate, a weapon of mass destruction. When he saw Jin Ing, the head eunuch of the Ceremony Directorate, he rarely looked him in the eye. However, all of this ended with Wang Zhen's death and Ing Zong's defeat. Jin Ing made the right choice at the first moment and relied on Zhu Qiu. Not long after, Zhu Qiu ascended the throne and Jin Ing held great power. He also obtained the mission of reorganizing the embroidered uniform guards of the Eastern Faction Guards and the entire group of eunuchs from Zhu Qiu. Once the power of the court was in his hands, all people submitted. Chen Guan was one of the eunuchs who changed his attitude very quickly. He immediately chose to pledge his loyalty to Jin Ing. Indeed, he disappeared from the list of eunuchs to be purged first. However, as Dai Zong's position became more and more stable, Jin Ying's power grew with each passing day. In the end, he was caught by Jin Ing. Chen Guan, who had been caught, couldn't understand. He had already offered up all his wealth and was only given a small courtyard in the capital. Why had he not been let go? However, only after entering the embroidered uniform guard's prison did he realize that he had been implicated. Jin Ing wanted to capture Ji Guang, but had no clues, so he had been brought here. When he had first entered the prison, Chen Guan had displayed a hint of stubbornness. He really hadn't said anything. This was how smart he was. He believed that if he said anything, it would mean his death. But when Jin Ing personally met with him in the prison, everything changed. Jin Ing promised that as long as Chen Guan told her where Ji Guang was hiding and he successfully found Wang Zhen's wealth, she would restore him to his position as head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. Not only would he be able to live, he would also be able to regain his lofty position and hold great power. Chen Guan had no choice but to seriously consider all of this. After an intense mental struggle, he finally revealed that Ji Guang might be hiding in a rundown temple on the outskirts of the capital. That place had originally been a secret meeting point. This was also one of Wang Zhen's cleverness. A crafty rabbit had 3 burrows. Wang Zhen had once worried that he would one day fall and be targeted, so he had a place to hide. The temple appeared to be in ruins, but it had actually been remodeled underground. Not only could it hide people, it had also prepared a lot of food. It could guarantee that one wouldn't have to worry about survival for a month or even longer. After receiving this news, the operation at the Eastern Faction headquarters took place. As expected, they found the former commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang. Chapter 225. Ji Guang took the initiative to step forward. The East Faction protector walked forward and tied him up tightly. Regarding this, Ji Guang did not resist at all from beginning to end. Wang Zhen had put him in an important position, so he was very skilled. Usually, 5 or 6 big men would not be able to get close to him. However, this time, he was facing 100 East Faction protectors. If he had to fight, he would undoubtedly be looking for trouble. Moreover, Ji Guang had been hiding for a long time. Perhaps it would be a relief if someone found him. The small temple was searched carefully. However, other than some food and water, nothing else was found. In the end, only he was secretly brought to the imperial prison. When Jin Ing heard the news that Ji Guang had been captured, she came to the imperial prison. She saw Ji Guang, who seemed to be in a good mood, chatting with Chen Guan, who had surrendered. "Hee, the 2 of you, I didn't expect that the 3 of us would meet again here. Are you surprised?" Jin Ing said this because she was feeling emotional. In the past, when Wang Zhen was still around, they actually had many opportunities to meet. However, because their standpoints were different and Jin Ying's performance was very mediocre, it was difficult for her to be taken seriously. Chen Guan and Ji Guang did not speak. They did not know how to respond. Jin Ing did not mind. Instead, she continued to enlighten them. Perhaps this is how the affairs of the world change. Yesterday you were high and mighty. Today you may become a prisoner. Therefore, the most important thing is to enjoy the best time and recognize the situation. Your former master, Wang Zhen, is already dead. Perhaps he has already gone to hell. There is no need for you to follow him because there is still a bright future and good days ahead of you. How about it? Follow me. As long as you become my people, no one will make things difficult for you in the future. Ji Ning spoke in a bewitching tone. If others want to follow me, they have to think of many ways to achieve it. However, I have high hopes for the two of you. I am willing to take the initiative and give you a chance. As long as you tell me where Wang Zhen's treasures are hidden, you will naturally be reinstated. Isn't that the best? Of course, you can also choose not to say anything and continue to be loyal to your deceased former master. If that's the case, you won't have an easy life for the rest of your lives. I don't think there's a need for me to continue explaining to you what the Imperial Prison has to offer. If you want, you can have a taste of the 108 types of torture. Sticks and candy. Chen Guan's expression changed when he saw the two extreme techniques. Although Ji Guang didn't show anything on the surface, he was also conflicted in his heart. All of them had once held great power in their hands. It was precisely because of this that they had enjoyed wonderful things. Now that they had lost them, that feeling was the most painful. It had to be said that Jin Ing understood people's weaknesses too well. After saying this, he didn't immediately force them to make a choice. Instead, he laughed and left. After he left, there were still people who served them good wine and dishes, treating them like VIPs. This was one of Jin Ying's methods. Using sugar-coated bullets to bombard these two people and let them see the beauty of life. This way, their will to die would become weaker and weaker, and in the end, they would be used by him. In the immortal abode of the capital, the emergency production of the War Walla play had already begun. Madame Xue and Madame Xiang had personally witnessed how Yang Chendong had killed all his enemies with a wave of his finger. Naturally, it was much easier to arrange the plot. That was why the plot could be arranged in such a short time and presented in front of everyone. Yang Chendong had defeated the powerful Walla army. Everyone in the capital knew about this, and even a child of 2 or 3 years old would remember the name of the Dong Shuai. But as for the exact details, many people didn't know. Now that the play had been produced, everyone finally understood what had happened. Madame Xue and Madame Xiang had intentionally added in a few mythological elements, making the play even more entertaining and allowing even more people to understand the power and mystery of the Duke of Loyalty. With the play, the immortal abode, which had already been a difficult place to obtain, became even more popular. In order to catch a glimpse of the war god, some high officials and nobles even offered several times the market price just to get a seat. This flattery made Yang Chendong's limelight unparalleled for a while. Outside the Yang clan manor, an endless stream of young people came to join him every day. These people had come to join Yang Chendong after watching the War God Battle Walla play. In their eyes, the Duke of Loyalty was a great hero. Good men should follow in the footsteps of such a person, so that they wouldn't have wasted their lives. Outside the manor, people would come to join him every day, willingly renouncing their original identities to join Yang Chendong, even if it was just a servant. But Yang Chendong didn't accept any of this. If he wanted to develop, he naturally couldn't do without people. There were indeed many men who were knowledgeable and had good physical fitness among those who sought refuge from Yang Chendong. However, Yang Chendong did not want any of them. For no other reason than the fact that he didn't know much about these people. Who knew if some of them were spies sent by Dai Zong or Evening Zone? Even though there weren't many secrets in the Yang clan manor, Yang Chendong didn't want to waste his energy on guarding against the people around him. He still had too many things to do, such as arranging for Teng Shan to escort goods to the Walla. After meeting with Yes Hen last time, they decided on an important matter of trade. Now that the Walla's army had retreated from the Ming dynasty's territory, the matter of trade naturally began. The only difference was that the ones in charge this time were the mercenaries led by Teng Shan. First of all, the mercenaries didn't have to pay taxes to Zhu Qiu. Even Jin Ing and the others didn't have the guts to collect taxes, but the amount of money involved was still considerable. Second of all, not only did Tingshan want to trade with the Wala, but he also wanted to take the opportunity to observe the geography of the grasslands and draw a map. One day, when the battle was decided, all of this would be of great use. Thirdly, in order for the Yang faction's new army to become an invincible cavalry army, they would need more war horses. And if one wanted to buy and sell war horses, the grasslands were undoubtedly the cheapest and most reasonable. With these 3 points, Tingshan had already started to prepare for trade with the Wala. Since it was trade, the escorts had to be on the ground. The main thing was that the merchant caravan was large. And Yang Chendong was using the Bai clan's merchant caravan. Since the last time Bai Peng wanted to ask Yang Chendong to come forward on behalf of the merchants in the capital but failed to do so, the next day, Yang Qin, the sixth sister, brought her husband, Bai Peng, to Yang village to ask for forgiveness. Bai Peng had been drinking with the merchants and was picked up, so he volunteered to come to the Yang clan manor. However, Yang Chendong very calmly rejected him. After that, Bai Peng was naturally ridiculed by the merchants. When he returned home, he was seen by his wife, Yang Qin, and told her the whole story. When Yang Qin found out about the situation, she immediately infuriated her husband. This was the first time the virtuous Yang Qin had publicly questioned her husband. At that time, Bai Peng was naturally very angry. He was actually looked down upon by a woman, which made him feel like he had lost all face. However, after listening to his wife's words, he realized that he had been used. If he went to find Yang Chendong, he would be viewed as an enemy by the great Ming dynasty. This was a win-win situation. On the other hand, his friends who drank with him could be exempted from the tax and save a lot of money. Knowing that he had been used and, more importantly, he had offended the Duke of Loyalty, Bai Peng was filled with regret. The next morning he came to the Yang clan manor with his wife. Since sixth sister had come forward, Yang Chendong had to meet her. Not only that, Yang Chendong also expressed his position and gave enough face to sixth sister and gave enough benefits to the Bai family. Yang Chendong said, "Sixth sister, sixth brother-in-law, as a merchant, you are protected by the country, so you should pay taxes to the country for your original interests. Otherwise, the country is unstable. How can you do stable business? So paying taxes is normal and even necessary." It must be said that this was not Yang Chendong's noble character, but his sincere words. Not for other reasons, but because the merchants in Qiqian City had to pay taxes, and the tax paid was far higher than the ratio of 100 to 1, but within the range of 50 to 1, referring to the profit. Even so, there were still countless people who went to the newly established tax bureau to apply for a business license every day. So it could be seen that the benefits were still very big. Qiqian City was still too small, and the taxes of the merchants would not be of much use to the rapidly growing Yang Xie faction. But in the long run, it was all worth it. Think about it. In the future, the territory that they occupy will increase, the population will increase, and there will be more businesses. At that time, the business tax will play a huge role. With such thoughts, how could he not support Zhu Qiyu's decision to collect taxes? At the very least, he had to let the people here get used to it first. As for himself, he had to pay what should be paid, and what he could avoid was best. No matter what, Bai Peng was his sixth brother-in-law, and more importantly, the Bai family had some status among the merchants in the capital. In order to build a strong system, or even a country, not only did they need an army that could fight tough battles, they also needed to recruit all kinds of talents. As such, Yang Chendong decided to pull in the Bai family. While sixth sister and sixth brother-in-law were here, he told them that the mercenaries wanted to trade with the Wala, and that they needed to hire a large merchant caravan. "I've decided to recommend the Bai family's merchant caravan. Is there any problem?" Chapter 226. Can we? Bai Peng was very excited when he heard this. He even looked at his wife, Yang Qin, with a grateful expression. Normal merchants would not have the guts to trade with the Wala. It was rumored that the Wala were murderous people who would raise their sabers at the slightest disagreement. Doing business with them was like risking one's life to earn money. However, it depended on the person. The same thing was different when it came to the mercenaries. As the battle between the war god and the Walla spread throughout the capital, other than remembering the great hero, Yang Chendong, they also remembered the mercenaries. This was an army with few people but with advanced firearms. It was said that each of them could fight against 100 people. When they faced the Walla army, they could easily crush the enemy. There were also people who said that when Tumu was defeated, it was these mercenaries who saved Ingzong and the 9 important officials of the country. As the discussions became more and more intense, people started to worship the mercenaries blindly. It was as if this army was omnipotent. Now, it was these powerful mercenaries who wanted to do business with the Walla people. The Bai family was just hitching a ride. This was a great thing. Imagine, while transporting goods for the mercenaries, wouldn't the Bai family also be able to bring some goods to sell to the Walla people? How big of a market would that be? The more he thought about it, the more excited Bai Peng became. When he looked at Yang Chendong, his eyes were filled with gratitude. All right, we're all family. There's no need to say any more words of thanks. This matter can be settled like this. As for the specific details, such as the amount of goods needed and the number of carriages needed, sixth brother-in-law can discuss it with my cousin Yang Fu. Yang Chendong had a confident smile on his face. As he spoke, he winked at his sixth sister, Yang Qin, with a mischievous look. Yang Qin was also amused by her little brother's performance. In fact, she was even happier. This was clearly her little brother helping the Bai clan. All right, I'll have to thank sixth brother this time. I won't say anything else. In the future, the Bai clan will definitely follow sixth brother's lead in business. Yes, we're all family in the future. Our Bai clan will listen to Dong Shuai. Bai Peng also hurriedly expressed his stance. We're family after all. Yang Chendong's face was full of smiles. He knew that with the help of the Bai clan, business would be much easier in the future. After his sixth sister and sixth brother-in-law left, Yang Chendong's mood became very good. However, everything was ruined because of a report sent from the bureau. According to the information provided by the bureau, Wang Zhen's trusted aide, Qin Guan, was first imprisoned by Jin Ing for a random reason. Not long after, Wang Zhen's other trusted aide, Ji Guang, was also found in a dilapidated temple on the outskirts of the city. Now, both of them were imprisoned. An insider reported that Jin Ing had just gone to the prison to meet the two of them. As for what exactly they talked about, it would take time to find out. Looking at this piece of fresh information, Yang Chendong threw it on the desk. Inform the bureau to investigate all the eunuchs and brocade guard officials who originally belonged to Wang Zhen and have defected to Jin Ing. Find out the pattern of their activities. Tiger's Mane saw that the sixth young master seemed to be a little angry. He nodded in agreement and left. When there was no one else in the room, Yang Chendong looked at the report in his hand and gently shook his head. It's best that you don't provoke me. Otherwise, I guarantee that you'll regret it. Yang Chendong had a premonition that once Jin Ing grasped power, she would come to make trouble for him. However, he hadn't expected things to happen so quickly. 5 days later, just as Tingshan had left the capital with a company of Lung Feng and a caravan of 300 carriages from the Bai clan and was heading in the direction of the Walla, 2 unexpected guests arrived at the Yang clan manor that afternoon. These 2 were Qin Guan and Ji Guang. After spending 2 days in the imperial prison, the 2 of them had finally thought it through. Rather than being loyal to a dead person, it was better to live on and enjoy the temptations and beauty of the world. They had chosen to join Jin Ing. As a sign of their loyalty, they had taken out all the treasures that Wang Zhen had hidden away when he left the capital and handed them over. A rough estimate put the value of the silver and the items together at nearly 5 million taels of silver. From this, one could see just how much money he usually had. And this didn't even include the deeds to the houses and lands. Among these contracts was the one that Wang Zhen had signed with Yang Chendong. He had invested 2 million taels of silver into the immortal abode, and after 1 year, he would receive a one-time dividend of 2,500,000 taels. He would then receive a minimum of 200,000 taels of silver each month. It was written that as long as the immortal abode and heaven beyond heaven continued to operate, this contract would remain in effect. Jean Ying was naturally overjoyed to receive such an enormous fortune. When she saw the contract between Wang Zhen and Yang Chendong, she immediately had an idea. She first reinstated Qin Guan as the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and Ji Guang as the commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Then, she arranged for the two of them to ask Yang Chendong for money. After nearly a year, the Immortal Abode had become the most popular restaurant in the capital. Countless customers lined up outside every day, so one could imagine how popular the restaurant was. Now was the time for this contract to take effect. Chen Guan and Ji Guang went to a side hall of the Yang clan manor. Compared to before, they were much more respectful today. If not for Jean Ying's urging, they wouldn't even have wanted to make this trip. Yang Chendong was no longer the same person as before. Although he had only been in the capital for a little more than a year, his status was completely different from when he had first arrived. He was now the Duke of Loyal and Gallant, holding the title of Duke. Most importantly, he had a mercenary army that could strike fear into the hearts of the Walla. It was precisely because of this that Qin Guan and Ji Guang had chosen to come today. This was because a group of 100 mercenaries had just left for the Walla this morning. At this time, only 100 mercenaries were left in the capital. Some of them were stationed at the Yang Clan Bank, Heaven Beyond Heaven, and Immortal Abode. The true number of mercenaries in the Yang clan manor was only 30. Sensing that Yang Chendong's strength was at its weakest, the two of them decided to go to the Yang clan manor. After handing over their visiting cards, they went to a side hall in the outer courtyard to wait. In the side hall were 4 other Cold Front brothers dressed in camouflage uniforms. They stood in pairs, their eyes fixed on Qin Guan and Ji Guang. A tense and oppressive aura permeated the room. Ji Guang had won Wang Zhen's trust not only because of his loyalty, but also because he was one of the strongest members of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. However, even he didn't have the slightest chance of victory when facing the 2 Lung Feng who were staring at him. Time passed like this, minute by minute, second by second. After an entire hour, Yang Chendong still did not appear. But Qin Guan and Ji Guang were already drenched in cold sweat. They truly couldn't understand how these mercenary brothers had managed to remain motionless for an hour, only keeping a close eye on their movements. Were they not tired? They naturally didn't know that the most basic requirement for Cold Front soldiers was to train their posture. It was often possible for them to stand there for an entire morning, or even longer. Not to mention that it had only been an hour. But no matter who it was, if they were stared at for an hour, they would feel their hair stand on end. Just as the two of them were wondering if they should leave first and come back another day, Yang Chendong, dressed in green, yawned as he walked into the side hall, accompanied by Tiger's Mane on his left and Beta Persei on his right. As soon as they entered the hall, Yang Chendong said politely, "Ayaya, I slept too deeply. I heard that you've been here for an hour. I'm really sorry." Although he said he was sorry, he didn't seem to be sorry at all. Yang Chendong sat down on the chair at the head of the table, then drank the fragrant tea brought by Tiger's Mane and asked casually, "You two just came out of the Imperial prison. I haven't congratulated you yet. Sigh, if Eunuch Wang was still here, I'm sure you wouldn't have to suffer like this." The moment he came up, he brought up the matter of the two of them in prison and even mentioned Wang Zhen's name. Chen Guan and Ji Guang's expressions turned ugly. Now that they had sided with Jean Ying, it was tantamount to betraying Wang Zhen. If someone said the name of the previous owner in front of you, no matter who it was, their expression wouldn't be good. Their expressions were ugly. They knew that Yang Chendong was disgusting them, but they couldn't vent their anger. Was the Duke of Loyalty so easy to offend? Especially when there were 6 burly men staring at them. They were afraid that if they did anything extreme, they would walk out of here in one piece. Their expressions were ugly, and their hearts were filled with unwillingness. But since they were here, they had to get down to business. After Qin Guan gave Ji Guang a look, a contract was delivered to Yang Chendong. "Duke Yang, take a look at this first." The contract was delivered to Tiger's Mane first, then placed in front of Yang Chendong. Putting down the teacup in his hand, Yang Chendong looked at the contract curiously, then laughed. "This Wang Zhen, he's still playing this game with me. Back then, he clearly said that the contract was lost. Now, he suddenly appeared. Is he trying to act shamelessly? He seemed to be talking to himself, but also seemed to be talking to Chen Guan and Ji Guang. Then, in front of the two of them, he tore the contract into pieces. This action frightened Chen Guan and Ji Guang. The two of them seemed to instinctively stand up. Following their movements, the four men who had been watching them closely also took a few steps forward and came to their side. From the looks of it, if they dared to do anything extreme, they would immediately attack. Chapter 227. Duke Yang? What do you think you're doing? Chen Guan asked angrily. This was clearly a scoundrel trying to deny the debt. Although Ji Guang didn't say anything, his tightly clenched fists were enough to express his anger and dissatisfaction. Yang Chendong, on the other hand, acted as if he didn't see anything. He smiled and shook his head. Please don't take offense. My guild will give you an explanation for this matter. Tiger's Mane, go to my study and bring me the contract with Wang Zhen's handprint. Tiger's Mane nodded and left to carry out his orders. Chen Guan and Ji Guang couldn't help but glance at each other, a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't understand what that handprint contract meant. However, when Tiger's Mane returned and Yang Chendong placed a contract with his handprint on it in front of them, they understood what was going on. The contract was a receipt. It said that Wang Zhen was in urgent need of money due to the upcoming battle with the Walla, so he took 2,500,000 taels of silver from the Immortal Abode in advance. Because of the breach of the contract, the Immortal Abode's income would have nothing to do with him in the future. There was no writing on the contract, only a bright red handprint. In other words, with this receipt, Yang Chendong and Wang Zhen no longer had any debts. Do you two see this? Before I left for the Walla, Eunuch Wang came to me and said that he was in urgent need of money. He also said that he couldn't find the contract he had written with me, so he sent me this receipt. It also has his handprint on it. Yang Chendong's voice was still echoing in the side hall, but Chen Guan shook his head firmly. That's impossible. This eunuch has never heard of such a thing. That's right. Even if there was such a thing, Eunuch Wang would have left behind a signature and not just a handprint, Ji Guang said confidently. No wonder they thought this way. It was just a handprint. How could they be sure that Wang Zhen had left it behind when he was already dead? Seeing their suspicious expressions, Yang Chendong was displeased. He said sternly, "What? Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean that it won't happen? As for why Eunuch Wang only pressed his fingerprint and didn't sign it, you should ask him. I'll say it again. I've already given the silver to Wang Zhen and the matter has long been settled. What's the meaning of you suddenly bringing out the original contract? Do you think I'm a pushover? If that's the case, you can go ahead and sue me." With an angry look, Yang Chendong suddenly stood up, flicked his sleeves, and left the side hall, accompanied by the burly Beta Persei. Sue! Chen Guan and Ji Guang were in the mood to curse. Even the contract had been completely torn apart. What could he use to sue? It was clear that Yang Chendong didn't want to return the money and made him feel wronged. Originally, he knew that the debt collection this time would not go smoothly. But now, it seemed that it was not only not going smoothly, it was simply looking for a nail to nail and asking for humiliation. As for Yang Chendong, he didn't have the slightest intention of putting them in his eyes. With their status, they would make people tremble wherever they went. Even if they went to the homes of important officials, they would be treated like distinguished guests. But when they came to the Yang Manor, they couldn't even enter the main hall. In the early Ming dynasty, it was the Wuing Hall and Wenhua Hall who assisted the emperor in reviewing memorials and acted as advisors. The Ming dynasty's Emperor Zhu Di also allowed the cabinet officials to participate in government affairs, but they were not allowed to control the officials. Starting from Mingren Sec's Zhu Gaoqi, he used the 6 ministers directly under him. Because of Yang Chendong, now that there were 2 emperors ruling together, the court officials were scattered, causing the cabinet to be severely lacking in personnel. Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect and Zhu Qiyu of the Dai sect had simply abandoned the cabinet and placed important positions in the 6 ministries and the group of eunuchs. This was a place that was different from history. But because of this, the power of the eunuch group became more and more important. But even so, in front of Yang Chendong, they were still repeatedly rebuffed. Even now, they lacked basic respect. Just like now, after waiting for Yang Chendong to leave the side hall, Tiger's Mane looked at Qin Guan and Ji Guang angrily and said, "The two of you, please." Preposterous. Seeing that the other party was going to drive them away, Ji Guang finally couldn't hold it in anymore. After a flash of coldness flashed in his eyes, he suddenly reached out to grab Tiger's Mane's neck. Like a giant eagle stretching out its claws, he went straight for the throat. Previously, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple for a long time and had been sullen for a long time. Now that he was finally restored to his official position, he could finally show his strength. Now, he was treated so lightly by a duke with no real power, and even a servant dared to shout at him. How could he bear it? Ji Guang, who was angry, finally couldn't hold it in and exploded. His arm was like a long snake. Under the sudden explosion, there seemed to be a popping sound in the air as he grabbed at the air. "Come at me." Facing this sudden attack, Tiger's Mane wasn't afraid. Instead, he was happy and calm. With a loud laugh, his body suddenly leaned back. With his feet as the axis, his whole body leaned back. Although he was leaning backwards, he did not fall down. Instead, he was like a roly-poly toy. When he fell down, he spun around and stood firm again. At the same time, he threw a heavy punch forward like a tiger stirring up wind. Ji Guang had the idea of striking first to gain the upper hand. He threw a quick punch in order to vent the anger in his heart and also to remind Yang Chendong that he, an embroidered uniform guard, wasn't so easy to deal with. He had real skills. Never would he have thought that his punch would hit nothing but air. When he didn't hit the target, his body naturally leaned forward. At this time, Tiger's Mane threw a heavy punch back. As expected of an expert in the embroidered uniform guard, Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. When he saw the heavy punch in front of him, his body quickly retreated. In the eyes of others, the punch was close to the chest. It seemed like it could hit at any time, but it was always just a little bit off. Ji Guang kept retreating while Tiger's Mane kept chasing. This situation continued until Ji Guang's body leaned back to a certain extent. Until Tiger's Mane used up all the strength in his punch, there was still a distance of 2 centimeters between them. At this moment, the two of them had already stood still and maintained a somewhat ambiguous aura. Ji Guang's body leaned back and Tiger's Mane's body leaned forward, so that the distance between their eyes was less than 50 centimeters. Hee. It seemed like the fight had ended. While Ji Guang was still secretly shocked by the strength of the Yang family servants, he suddenly saw a strange smile on Tiger's Mane's face. This smile made Ji Guang's heart sink. He instinctively had a bad feeling. As soon as he sensed it, he saw Tiger Light's fist, which was about to hit Ji Guang's chest, suddenly turn into a palm. At the same time, it lengthened by 2 centimeters and stabbed into Ji Guang's heart like a sharp blade. Ji Guang suddenly felt a sharp pain. Then, the pain became stronger and stronger until his whole body bent into the shape of a prawn. He was completely tangled up. "You let me win, you let me win." In this exchange, Ji Guang suffered a great loss. He retreated, his face extremely pale. However, the 2 members of the Cold Blade Division who had been staring at him didn't have any intention of letting him go. They stepped forward, one on the left and one on the right. They clenched their fists and looked like they were going to teach him a lesson. He actually dared to make the first move under their watch. This was a provocation to them. Forget it, forget it. He has already learned his lesson. Of course, if he dares to make a move for no reason next time, we will have to beat him up again and hand him over to you to deal with. Tiger's Mane took advantage of the situation and stopped the 2 members of the Cold Blade Division. However, his words were full of sarcasm. He couldn't beat them in a fight, and he wasn't competitive in scaring them. Moreover, he didn't have a handle on them. Chen Guan analyzed that there was no point in staying here. "All right, Ji Qianshi, let's go." However, as the saying goes, the mountains will not change and the rivers will flow forever. Let's wait and see. No matter what, he was still the head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate. He was used to being high and mighty. Now that he had been slapped in the face, it was in line with his personality to leave behind such harsh words. If it were anyone else, hearing such a threat, even if they didn't tremble in fear, their expression would have changed greatly. However, in Tiger's Mane's eyes, he laughed out loud in a completely different manner. As the saying goes, the mountains will not change. In that case, let's wait and see. I only hope that Eunuch Chen won't regret it. This duke has never known what regret is. Chen Guan angrily reprimanded Tiger's Mane, his face full of indignation. When these words came out, Tiger's Mane's face was also full of anger. Eunuch Chen, you're just a eunuch. Please remember your status. You can call yourself an eunuch, but you can't call yourself an eunuch. Otherwise, you'll have to pay a heavy price. Haha. As if he had found a way to turn the tables, Chen Guan laughed out loud. My apologies, this duke is already used to calling myself an eunuch. I'm afraid I can't change it. Yeah. Chen Guan pulled Ji Guang, who had been punched, away and left Yang Manor. However, as soon as they left the manor, he changed from his earlier laughing expression to that of Ji Guang. Ji Qianshi, this time we messed up our mission. I'm afraid that Eunuch Jean won't be too happy. What should we do? Daring to hurt a member of our embroidered uniform guard, this loyal eunuch is clearly audacious. Next, this official will let them know that there are some things that they can't do, or even think about. Don't worry, I'll make arrangements when I get back. Ji Guang's face was full of anger, but he couldn't be blamed for his actions. Tiger's Mane's punch just now wasn't light. If it weren't for his superb martial arts skills, it was possible that he would have lost half his life. All right, if you need this duke's cooperation, just let me know, Chen Guan said angrily. It was obvious that at this moment, he hated Yang Chendong to the bone. Chapter 228. Yang Manor. Tiger's Mane came to Yang Chendong's study and recounted what had just happened, as well as the harsh words Chen Guan had said before he left. Young master, they're too arrogant. I really regret that I only used 60% of my strength in that punch. I should have used more strength and left Ji Guang here. Yang Chendong shook his head. No matter what, the other party is still the commander of the Brocade Guards, a dignified fourth-rank official. If we kill him here, it'll be hard to explain to the outside world. But they've already left Yang Manor. Yang Chendong, who looked displeased, snorted coldly. Walla had just retreated not long ago and had just reached an agreement with Jin Ing. The two of them had not interfered with each other's business. Who would have thought that he would come looking for trouble so soon? This time, it was true that he wanted the silver, but more importantly, he wanted to test his reaction. Since that was the case, he couldn't disappoint. Didn't you want to see my reaction? Then I'll let you know what the consequences of offending Yang Manor are. Tiger's Mane, make the arrangements immediately and act according to the plan. But remember, you have to act appropriately. You can't kill anyone. You have to let some people know what it means to live a life worse than death. Yang Chendong gave the order, and Tiger's Mane's eyes immediately lit up. Please rest assured, young master. I'll go inform them and make the arrangements personally. After saying this, Tiger's Mane turned to leave, but unfortunately, Yang Chendong's voice came from behind him. You don't have to go. Arrange for someone to inform Yang San. It'll be a good opportunity to test the actual combat ability of the newly established operation team of your security bureau. All right, after you're done, tell the people in the manor that in an hour, this young master will take the ladies to Chicken Crow Mountain for a tour. You and Beta Persei can't be absent. Yang Chendong naturally knew that Tiger's Mane wanted to do it himself. He could understand this feeling, but now was not the time to turn hostile. An appropriate warning was fine, but he still understood the principle of overdoing it. At the very least, the people who are always around him must be cleared of suspicion during the operation. Tiger's Mane's face, which was originally full of excitement, immediately turned bitter. He knew that the possibility of warming up was gone. However, since this was an order from the young master, he naturally wouldn't go against it. He lowered his head and complied. An hour later, Yang Chendong brought Hu Yen and Xiao Yin as well as a platoon of Lingfeng brothers, as well as Chiu V's first squad, and headed straight for Chicken Crow Mountain. On this trip, there were more than 10 carriages loaded with goods. It could be seen that Yang Chendong was prepared to stay for a while. In the capital, Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San received an order from the Yang family manor. Beside him stood the captain of the Ghost Sniper Squad, Bai Zhua, and an unfamiliar man with cold eyes. Haha, the young master is finally going to make a move. This is our Ghost Sniper Squad's chance to show off. After receiving the order, Bai Zhua's face lit up with joy. He seemed to have seen another addition to his list of achievements. However, as the person directly carrying out the order, Yang San didn't show anything on his face. He also ignored Bai Zhua's excitement. Instead, he looked at the unfamiliar man and said, "Captain Tai, what do you think?" Captain Tai, full name Tai Hu, was the captain of Yang Xie's new army, the Wolf Fang Special Forces. The Wolf Fang Special Forces was a special squad formed under the special request of Yang Chendong. They were used to carry out any special tasks. There weren't many of them, only 20 of them. However, every one of them was carefully selected from the elite members of the Cold Vanguard. They were capable, well-equipped, agile, well-trained, and strong in combat. Regardless of whether it was reconnaissance, assassination, camouflage, or firearms, they were all very skilled. Such a squad was also one of Yang Chendong's trump cards. If the Ghost Sniper Squad was said to be able to take people's lives from a distance, then the Wolf Fang Special Forces was the trump card in close combat. Yang Chendong, who had exposed some of his strength, had already given an order to Qiqian City to let the Wolf Fang Special Forces rush to the capital. This time, in order to give a warning to the eunuch group, he temporarily lent them to Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San so that they could complete the task better. As soon as they arrived, they were temporarily assigned to the operation team of the Security Bureau. According to Yang Chendong's intention, they would be separated after training more outstanding talents. Tai Hu, who was named, answered without hesitation when asked what he thought of this matter. The sixth young master's words are orders. It is an order that must be completed. Deputy Bureau Chief Yang San, please give the task to us. We will definitely give you a surprise tonight. Okay, I believe in Captain Tai. If you have any ideas, just do it. If you need our cooperation, please let us know. My Security Bureau and the Ghost Sniper Squad will fully cooperate with you. Yang San's voice came out immediately. Since Yang Chendong attached so much importance to this matter, Yang San of course had to perform well. This was also the first appearance of the Wolf Fang Special Forces since its establishment. It was time for them to show their skills. Nanqing district of the capital. There were many ancient courtyards here. Most of these courtyards belonged to the royal family, so many of them were eventually occupied by eunuchs. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. With the emperor's trust, the eunuchs were powerful, they acted on behalf of the emperor, and they were awe-inspiring. In one of the courtyards, a beardless man in brocade clothes was resting in a small pavilion in the courtyard. Although this person looked ordinary and was not tall enough, in fact, he was a eunuch leader with real power. He was in charge of more than 30 eunuchs. And with his position, he was qualified to have the right to live outside. When he was not on duty, he would go back to his small courtyard to enjoy himself. He abandoned the servile appearance in the palace and bowed to everyone. He enjoyed the feeling of being the master. Two delicate-looking maids brought a fruit plate and tea to the small pavilion and served the eunuch. He squinted his eyes happily as he enjoyed himself. This was the life of a superior person. This was the dream he should pursue. Just as he was enjoying his beautiful life, the eunuch, who had just closed his eyes, felt that his surroundings were quiet. That kind of silence gave him a creepy feeling. Instinctively, he wanted to open his eyes to see what was going on. Just as he had this thought, a cold chill came from his neck. Although he still did not open his eyes, his perception had told him that there should be a sharp and cold dagger on his neck. Don't even think about opening your eyes. Otherwise, the moment you see my face, it will be the moment you meet the King of Hell. A cold and indifferent voice suddenly sounded in his ear. This voice made the eunuch's body tremble. The smooth and slick side of his bones was also revealed. "Brother, I won't open my eyes. Please don't hurt me. Tell me, what do you want? Is it silver? I don't have much, but it is enough for ordinary people to live a peaceful life." Pooh. Just as he finished speaking, there was a sudden pain in his right arm. The eunuch could not help but open his mouth and howl. However, the coldness that had just left returned to his neck. You can scream, but before they arrive, I guarantee that the first person to die will be you." I won't scream. When he felt the killing intent, the eunuch became very obedient. Pooh. Another knife stabbed into his left arm. The eunuch almost could not help but scream. Although he controlled his voice because of the fear of death, his whole body could not help but twist. He really could not understand. Why did the other party stab him twice without any request? Could it be that this was not for money, but because he had offended someone and was here to seek revenge? Fortunately, the answer came out quickly. He heard the voice in his ear. "You better remember, you can call yourself this eunuch in the future, but you must not call yourself this eunuch to save trouble. Otherwise, next time, I won't just hurt your arms, I will directly take your life. Remember." The cold voice was still echoing in his mind, but the eunuch's mind was already at a loss. He really couldn't figure out what was going on. Could it be that the other party wanted to kill him because of a title? What kind of logic was this? How was this possible? If this matter was told to him by someone else, it would be hard to believe. But now, the real thing was happening to him. Moreover, the piercing pain under his arms made him want to twitch uncontrollably. Everything was so real that it couldn't be faked. So what was going on? Village Gazing Pavilion. This was one of the most famous restaurants in the capital. Before the rise of the immortal abode, no one would have doubted that this was one of the 10 great restaurants of the capital. But now, this place had fallen into decline. But even though it had declined, it had once been prosperous. One could still see its former glory here, and it could still attract nostalgic customers. Ji Guang was one of them. Before Yang Chendong had come to the capital, before the immortal abode, Ji Guang had been a frequent customer here. Because of his generosity, the proprietress of this restaurant had treated him with special treatment. But because this woman already had a man, Ji Guang did not do anything excessive out of respect for the sake of morality and etiquette. Until recently, it was rumored that the Walla's army might break into the capital, and business there was already difficult. The proprietress of the Village Gazing Pavilion left for Nanjing, but his wife did not. In her words, the Village Gazing Pavilion was her life. Even if she had to die, she would die here. Their opinions differed, and the result was a peaceful divorce. The woman bought the Village Gazing Pavilion with silver and kept it. Chapter 229. A while ago, Ji Guang had been hiding in the ruined temple and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. This time, after pledging allegiance to Jin Ying, he finally regained his freedom. Tonight, he appeared here and saw Li Xiu, the woman who still had some charm and had feelings for him. In the private room, Li Xiu, boldly confided her feelings to Ji Guang. She also said that as a divorced woman, she did not ask to be a bride. As long as Ji Guang was willing to come and see her often, she would be satisfied. This kind of attitude and idea of being a mistress was very advanced in this era. It also made Ji Guang very touched. However, he did not immediately agree. According to his thinking, although his position seemed to be high and powerful, he didn't know how many people were watching him. If he wasn't careful, he didn't know where he would lose his life. He couldn't give Li Xiu any sense of security. He did not agree. When Ji Guang left the village pavilion, although he did not look back, it was as if he had eyes in the back of his head. He could feel that Li Xiu was heartbroken and tearful. Hardening his heart, Ji Guang did not look back. He walked out of the village pavilion and came to the street. At this time, it was already the curfew time and the street was very deserted. However, as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards, Qian Shi naturally did not have to worry about being interrogated by the military office of the 5 cities. He was still thinking about Li Xiu and walking alone on the quiet street. Suddenly, a bone-chilling feeling spread throughout his body. An instinct made him stop abruptly and reach out to touch his waist out of habit. Ji Guang's reaction was very fast. With his sixth sense, he sensed the danger in advance. It was a pity that he was facing Tai Hu, the captain of the Langya Special Forces. Tai Hu originally wanted to make a move on Qingguan, but the Security Bureau's intelligence showed that this person would not come out of the palace tonight. Therefore, he settled for the next best thing and chose Ji Guang. He heard that this person had some skills and wanted to learn from him. Tai Hu, who suddenly appeared, did not wait for Ji Guang to draw his sword. He slashed at him first. A piece of hair fell down from the tip and fluttered to the ground. Ji Guang's face was already ghastly pale. He knew that it was not that his opponent's saber technique was not good enough, but that he had done it intentionally. If his opponent had wanted to take his life, he would have been a dead man by now. "Who are you? Why do you want to kill me? Do we have any grudges?" Ji Guang stared at the other's eyes in the dark and asked nervously, "Cut the crap and draw your blade. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. You'll understand how laughable your little bit of martial power is in front of a true expert." Tai Hu had no intention of revealing his identity. Today, not only did he want to hurt Ji Guang and make him pay for what he did during the day, he also wanted to instill fear in his heart so that he would never dare to go against the sixth young master again. Ji Guang was also an experienced and knowledgeable person who had experienced many trials of life and death. Naturally, he could tell that the other party had no intention of talking nonsense with him. Confident in his saber skills, he drew his saber with a clang and pointed it at Tai Hu. "All right, let this official see just how strong you are." Ignorant. Seeing Ji Guang draw his saber, Tai Hu's eyes flashed with contempt. He was one of the earliest members of the Cold Front. Because of his ruthlessness and decisiveness, he was admired by Yang Chendong and was given a saber technique for close combat. This saber technique was not flashy, but every move was fatal. It was originally the result of Yang Chendong's countless experiences of life and death. It was fine if he did not make a move, but when he did, it was a saber technique that could kill with a single strike. Because of this, when the first batch of Lung Feng graduates graduated, Tai Hu even received an extra triangular stiletto made of titanium compared to the others. This stiletto could cut through iron like mud. In Tai Hu's hands, it was like a tiger that had grown wings. He did not believe that there was anyone who could be his opponent in close combat. Now that Ji Guang had drawn his embroidered spring saber, he naturally did not fear him in the slightest. He even had enough confidence. After saying that he was ignorant, Tai Hu moved. He swept towards Ji Guang like a gust of wind. Ji Guang also moved, but he adopted a conservative defensive strategy. Before he figured out the tricks and details of the person in front of him, he decided to use defense instead of offense, looking for the most suitable opportunity. In the past, when faced with a sneak attack, Ji Guang also did the same. Moreover, he had succeeded. Who knew how many people had fallen in front of him, and he had found an opportunity to kill them instead. But this time, although he was full of confidence, he was destined to be disappointed. This was because the moment the military knife and embroidered spring saber collided with each other, the saber's body was split into two after the collision. By the time Ji Guang reacted, he felt a sharp pain on his left leg. There was already a deep cut there. Ji Guang did not know that this was because Yang Chendong had given the order not to kill anyone. Otherwise, if Tai Hu had changed the cut to a stiletto, a wound that could not be stopped would have appeared. Then, even if he did not die now, it would not be long before he died because of the incessant bleeding. With just one move, Ji Guang was defeated. His left leg was trembling because of the flowing force, and he could not even stand steadily. How could he dare to think about winning? After Tai Hu succeeded in one move, he put away the triangular stiletto that was covered in white light. Then, he turned and left without saying another word. Sometimes, when facing smart people, if you had to tell them your purpose, it would be an insult to their intelligence. Tai Hu left. Just like when he came, he suddenly appeared, and when he left, he suddenly disappeared. When he was sure that there was no killing intent in the surroundings and no danger, Ji Guang's left leg went soft, and he half knelt on the ground with a plop. Even though Ji Guang had experienced life and death, he was still covered in cold sweat. Tai, who was the only expert he had met in his life, and he took his life in one move. Now that he thought about it, no matter how he thought about it, it was terrifying. When he raised his head again, he realized that there was still candlelight in the village pavilion. At this moment, Ji Guang suddenly felt old and tired. In his position, he was prominent in front of others, but who knew how fearful he was when there was no one around? He, who had just experienced a life and death situation, wanted to have a good rest. The village gazing pavilion seemed to be his final resting place. Ji Guang dragged his bleeding leg and slowly walked towards the village gazing house. Then he gently knocked on the door, which was so loud in the quiet street. Ji Guang was just an abbreviation. On this night, more than 10 eunuchs with official positions who were taking shifts outside the palace were dealt with in various ways. Some were injured in the arms, some in the legs. Some even had their hair shaved off in their sleep without knowing it. This was Yang Chendong's warning. Any eunuch who dared to call himself a eunuch and was not a eunuch would be punished. The first time was a warning, but whether or not the next time would be to take someone's life, no one would know. The next morning, Chen Guan followed the plan he had discussed with Ji Guang the day before and prepared to call for a meeting. He called a few eunuch leaders here to discuss how to suppress Yang Chendong. But before he could send out the order to summon the eunuchs, more than 10 pieces of information arrived. By the time all the information was delivered to him, Chen Guan was already drenched in cold sweat. He hadn't expected that someone would move even faster than him. How did they do it? Yesterday, the 10-odd eunuchs who were taking shifts outside the palace were living in different parts of the capital, doing different things, but they were all suddenly attacked. What did this mean? It meant that a large net had been watching them for a long time, and they were just waiting for the right time to strike. If it hadn't happened, even Chen Guan wouldn't have believed it. He had thought about the consequences of offending Yang Chendong and made some preparations, but now it seemed that if the other party really wanted to kill him, it wouldn't be difficult. When a person felt that their life was in the hands of others at any time, it was a very bad feeling. Chen Guan was like this now. He didn't want to call for a meeting, but when he found out about Ji Guang's whereabouts, he went straight to village pavilion. Ji Guang was one of the top experts in the embroidered uniform guards, and he had personally experienced the feeling of being attacked last night. It was probably the most direct and effective to ask him how he felt. When Chen Guan brought a group of trusted aides to village pavilion, Ji Guang was resting in bed in Li Xiuer's boudoir upstairs. But no matter how one looked at Li Xiuer, she was glowing, giving people the feeling of a new life. No one knew that last night, Ji Guang had thought it through and wanted Li Xiuer, and the two of them were officially together. At this moment, Chen Guan rushed over, and all he got was Ji Guang's dissuasion. Chen Guan rushed into village pavilion with a group of embroidered uniform guards, giving Li Xiuer a fright. Fortunately, Ji Guang took her hand in time and squeezed it gently to comfort her. His eyes were full of gentleness when he looked at Li Xiuer, but when he looked up and saw the other embroidered uniform guards in flying suits rushing in, his expression didn't look good at all. "All of you leave first." The group of embroidered uniform guards looked at Chen Guan hesitantly, not knowing what to do. They were here to protect Eunuch Chen. If they left like this and something really happened, they were afraid that none of them would have a good ending. "With Ji Qianshi here, you all can leave for now." Chen Guan saw Ji Guang's displeasure and thought that this person's skills were extraordinary, so he nodded in agreement. The group of embroidered uniform guards left the room, and Ji Guang said to Li Xiuer affectionately, "Yes, Hen, leave for now. I have something to say to this lord." "Okay, but don't stand up. The wound on your leg has just stopped bleeding." Li Xiuer nodded obediently, but a trace of worry still appeared on her face. Chapter 230. I will. Ji Guang chuckled and watched Li Xiuer leave the room. Chen Guan's concerned voice sounded. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Yes, I'm hurt. The other party didn't intend to take my life. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have died last night. Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood was very calm, as if he was narrating something that had nothing to do with him. But these words were so deafening in Qin Guan's ears. Who did it? Even you are no match for them? Yes, I'm not that person's opponent. Even if I was on guard, even if I brought a few subordinates, he could still easily kill me. Speaking of this, Ji Guang's mood became a little depressed. After all, in his strongest aspect, he had to admit that he was inferior to the other party. This made him feel unreconciled. But whether he was convinced or not, the reality was like this. He was indeed not Tai Hu's opponent. He couldn't even withstand one move. Feeling that Ji Guang's tone seemed to be disheartened, Qin Guan asked tentatively, "Was it that person who did it?" Sigh. A long sigh. After what happened last night, Ji Guang thought it through and accepted it. Yang Chendong was not someone he could afford to offend. Moreover, this person ignored the law and acted extremely decisively and ruthlessly. He hadn't expected to make a move on his own accord, so he hadn't been on guard at all. Of course, if such an opponent was bent on targeting you, what could you do even if you were prepared? Forget it, Eunuch Chen. Some people are destined to be beyond our ability to deal with. If we have to force it, I'm afraid we will lose our lives. After being silent for a long time, Ji Guang said such words that Qin Guan could not believe. Are you afraid? Qin Guan did not believe that the always confident and arrogant Ji Guang would bow his head one day, and so completely. Yes, I'm afraid. Ji Guang admitted frankly. If that person wants to kill me, he can do it at any time. Tell me, Eunuch Qin, facing such an opponent, what do you want me to do? Would he continue to oppose that person until he lost his life? This time he's targeting me. I'm afraid he'll harm Eunuch Qin next time. Listen to me and let go. Knowing that Ji Guang still didn't know what had happened to the other eunuchs, Qin Guan let out a long breath and said, "Actually, he didn't just target you. Just last night, there were 13 steward eunuchs who were targeted. If they were injured, if their lives were threatened." What? Ji Guang, who was half lying on the bed, suddenly stood up. He stared at Qin Guan and asked, "Is what Eunuch Qin said true?" "I'm not lying to you." Qin Guan shook his head, his eyes filled with disappointment. Especially when he thought about how he had gone to the Yang family village to denounce them yesterday, he felt that it was so ridiculous. The other party had already made preparations and was just waiting for them to rush forward. They were so confused that they actually did as they were told. It was no wonder that they were scared and threatened. Qin Guan admitted it. This gave Ji Guang a big fright. His mind spun slightly, as if he had thought of something. He asked, "Eunuch Qin, where is he right now?" Although he didn't mention his name, Qin Guan still understood what Ji Guang meant. He replied, "I just received news that he went to Chicken Crow Mountain yesterday afternoon." Went to Chicken Crow Mountain? Who went with him? Are the servants who usually follow him here? Thinking of a possibility, Ji Guang asked aloud. They're all there. Even the mercenaries guarding the Yang family bank, the immortal abode, and the sky beyond heaven are all there. They didn't do anything strange. Qin Guan said this somewhat painfully. His face turned even uglier. When Jining heard this, he also sucked in a cold breath. Yang Chendong had gone to Chicken Crow Mountain. This was to create an alibi for him. With a group of subordinates by his side, the others had no choice but to forcibly separate him from the attack on the eunuchs last night. But this was the most frightening thing. If those people were still standing there, it could only mean one thing. After leaving the capital, the Duke of Loyalty still had people he could use, and they were people they didn't know existed. Last night, it had been these people who had attacked. The mercenaries were already very frightening. Now an unknown and mysterious force had appeared. How could they not be shocked? When he thought about how there was probably a pair of eyes watching his every move, Ji Guang couldn't help but shiver, and then he shook his head. Forget it, Eunuch Qin. Listen to this official's advice and let him go. We'll tell Eunuch Jin the situation and let him beat and punish him. As for what he wants to do, that's his business. As for us, we'll just obediently stay here. What? But if we do that, Jin Ing will inevitably look down on us, Chen Guan immediately retorted when he heard that Ji Guang was admitting defeat. So what if he looks down on us? It's better than losing his life. Besides, we gave him all of Wang Jin's treasures, so we've done a great service. Even if we put on a show for others, he won't touch us right now. Ji Guang shook his head. He knew that after making this decision, the chances of him being put in an important position were extremely small. But when he thought about Yang Chendong's various tricks, he suddenly felt that he was invincible. Ji Guang's words echoed in Chen Guan's ears, and after thinking for a long time, he finally made his decision. Fine. You rest and recover. I'll go and speak with eunuch Jin. Chen Guan left, and not long after, he went to the palace to see Jin Ing. He gave her a detailed account of what had happened yesterday afternoon and last night. In the end, he stated his own judgment that the Duke of Loyalty still had a mysterious force in the capital that they couldn't see. This force was so powerful that they couldn't deal with it. Jin Ing had just received Wang Jin's silver and was in a good mood. But when he heard Xin Guan's report, his face paled again and again. He suddenly recalled the result of his agreement with Yang Chendong. They had agreed to mind their own business, but now, Yang Chendong had broken the agreement. If there really was such a mysterious force that suddenly wanted to target him, what would he do? Jin Ing had just obtained great authority, so he needed to properly enjoy it. He didn't want to die at this moment. Thus, he quickly made his decision. Forget it. Since the Duke of Loyalty has Wang Jin's receipt, we'll let this matter rest. In addition, without this Duke's permission, you went to make trouble for the Duke of Loyalty. Since you were the ones who provoked this matter, you should resolve it yourselves. In short, we need to keep the peace. I don't want to see anyone injured or even killed because of this. Jin Ing shamelessly pushed all the blame onto Chen Guan and Ji Guang, choosing to stay out of the matter. Chen Guan sighed in relief that he would no longer pursue the matter of the silver, but he was also put in a very difficult position when he had to apologize. Eunuch Jin, is the Duke of Loyalty at Chicken Crow Mountain? Should we wait for him to come back? There's no need to wait. Some things should be resolved as soon as possible. How about this? You and Ji Guang immediately go to Chicken Crow Mountain. You must have a good attitude and be sincere. Do you understand? Jin Ing didn't want any accidents to happen when he left the palace, so he wanted to resolve the matter as soon as possible. Chen Guan left with a disheartened expression. After he left, there was a ban in the palace that spread among the group of eunuchs. In the future, no matter which eunuch they were, they had to address themselves as this duke, instead of this duke. Otherwise, they would have to bear the consequences. Chicken Crow Mountain. It was the end of autumn, and early winter was about to arrive. The leaves on the mountain were beginning to turn yellow, giving people a very bleak feeling. However, this didn't stop Hu Yen and Xiao Yin's interest. They arranged for people to bring out the meat skewers and all kinds of food that they had brought. Then they lit a fire, causing the air in the area to become much warmer. In response, Yang Chendong watched from the side without any intention of interfering. He liked to see his women happy. In his opinion, this was one of the goals he pursued. If he wanted the people to be happy, he first had to let his family be happy. Then, it would be the happiness of the entire Han people. With the experience from last time, Hu Yen and Xiao Yin were able to command the troops in an orderly manner. Yang Chendong didn't have to do any skewers like last time. He only needed to sit and enjoy the success. When the sky slowly darkened, the bonfire lit up the sky. Hu Yen and Xiao Yin had also prepared everything. Just as they were about to call Lu Lang to enjoy with them, Tiger's mane walked over. Young master, Chen Guan and Ji Guang are here. So fast? Yang Chendong, who had been prepared for this, was still somewhat curious when he heard that the two had rushed over in just a little more than a day. Yes, there are also 30 embroidered uniform guards. Among them, Ji Guang was carried over. Tiger's mane continued to explain the situation. Let them wait outside. This young master will go and see them in a while. Yang Chendong casually waved his hand. Since they had done something wrong, they should have the attitude of admitting their mistakes. Leaving them out for a while was just training. After sending away Tiger's mane, Yang Chendong followed Hu Yen and Xiao Yin to the bonfire. Everyone was waiting for them here. Outside, a few members of Cold Front were closely watching Qin Guan and Ji Guang's group. They had already been waiting here for nearly 2 hours. The weather at this time would become cold at night. The two of them didn't bring any warm clothing, so they felt a little cold. However, they could only endure it. This time, they were here to admit their mistakes. They weren't here to collect debts like yesterday. Chapter 231. A head eunuch of the Imperial Horse Directorate and a commander of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Normally, they were lofty figures, but right now, they were like children who had done something wrong, waiting for the adults to forgive them. On the other side, Yang Chendong was gargling his mouth after eating and drinking to his heart's content, while listening to Tiger's man's report on the information he'd received during the day. Oh, so Wolf's man and the others did well? Yes, they did very well. The process was clean and efficient. According to Yang San, it was beyond his expectations. Tiger's man replied in a low voice. Very good. Give them a collective third-class merit. Yang Chendong chuckled, then spat out the last mouthful of water in his mouth. Are they still waiting? They're waiting. Without the young master's permission, they wouldn't dare leave. Tiger's man's face lit up with joy. Even though he hadn't been the one to do it, seeing Qin Guan and the others lower their heads still made him happy. A hint of a smile flashed across Yang Chendong's face. Some people were just like that. They didn't want to be nice to others, and insisted on being beaten up before they knew what pain was. Forget it. It's already been 2 hours. It's getting dark, and they probably didn't bring any blankets. We can't keep them here for the night and then give them their things, can we? Tiger's man nodded in agreement. That's right. We'll just let them dry for a while. As for blankets and whatnot, we don't have any extra. Ha! Yang Chendong laughed heartily. Then, Tiger's man and Beta Persei led the way to where Qin Guan and Ji Guang were. No one knew what they talked about when they met. However, those who were observant noticed one thing. The embroidered uniform guard that had been standing guard outside the Immortal Abode street had all disappeared. In their place were the soldiers of the warden's office. It was also from this time onwards that everyone really managed to keep to themselves on the surface. The Immortal Abode was still packed to the brim, and the Beyond Heaven's Gate was also bustling with activity. Batch after batch of rare goods were being sent out from the gate to different locations. People were walking around the Yang family bank, either depositing or withdrawing money. Everything was done in an orderly manner. Time passed by 1449, and it was the Spring Festival of 1450. The Spring Festival of the Great Ming Dynasty was the busiest time of the year, and it was also the time for families to reunite. The entire capital was bustling with activity. Even the commoners were like this, let alone the people in the palace. As the emperor, not only did he have to reward his subjects for their hard work over the past year, he also had to receive many foreign diplomatic missions. This was especially true for the Great Ming Dynasty, which was a grand and powerful country. There were many vassal states and countries that didn't want to be conquered. Every year during the new year, they would send envoys to pay tribute to show their submission or respect. This year was also Zhu Qiu's first time as emperor. In order to show their respect, the diplomatic missions from many countries were much larger than in previous years. For a period of time, it was common to see people in strange attire in the capital. The population of the capital was rapidly increasing, and the number of consumers was increasing by the day. The business of the merchants was getting better, and more shops were opening. The shops that Yang Chendong had bought at a low price were rented out. Even though the prices were a little higher, they were still in short supply, allowing him to make a small profit. The capital began to prosper once more. This was the scene of a peaceful era. Places like the Immortal Abode, which were usually bustling with activity, were now even more difficult to find. This was especially true after the drama of the war between the war god and the Walla, which attracted even more praise. Anyone who saw this drama felt their blood boil, and even after leaving the immortal abode, they were still talking about it. At this time, it was time for Dai Zong to summon soldiers, and because of this, many people were seeking to join him. The Great Ming's military was primarily supported by military households. The so-called military households were born soldiers. Your father was a soldier. After becoming a military household, as long as you gave birth to a son, he would have to become a soldier when he grew up. This also ensured that the number of soldiers in the army would reach a stable level. However, the Battle of Tumu Fortress and Shihang's defeat had severely damaged the army, and its numbers were severely lacking. In these circumstances, Dai Zong, Zhu Qiyu, issued the order for the first conscription after taking the throne. He had originally believed that the treatment of soldiers was poor, and that there wouldn't be many who wanted to join the army, perhaps even a few. He had never imagined that the drama in the immortal abode would cause many young people, and even a few scholars, to join the army. When the news got out, it caused an uproar among the nobles. The Great Ming despised the military and emphasized the scholarly, even suppressing the military. The treatment and status of soldiers in society had always been extremely low. But now, there were scholars joining the army. Although it could be said that these scholars didn't have much of a future, for them to join the army was still a loss of face for scholars. Because of this, some proud literati hated Yang Chendong to the point that they even hated him. They believed that it was because of the drama in the immortal abode that this had happened, and that he was the main culprit. He had brought shame to all the scholars in the world. But just as they were discussing this, the Yang clan manor suddenly opened a Yang clan academy. To outsiders, it was said that the loyal and courageous duke had nothing better to do, and wanted to experience the feeling of teaching and educating people. But in reality, only he knew that this was for the future development of the Yang Xie Academy. Even though there were many advanced books in Crimson City, they had all been forcefully instilled by Yang Chendong. Without coming into contact with them, seeing them, or even understanding the principles behind them, it was difficult for them to make any progress. This gave young Master Yang the idea of nurturing talents and sending them to Crimson City. This was something he had no choice but to do. With Yang Chendong's current status and the schemes he had set up, it was impossible for him to leave the capital. Now was not the time for him to leave the capital and the center of power of the Great Ming dynasty. Since he could not return to Crimson City, he naturally could not go back to impart knowledge. His only choice was to find talents in the capital and impart knowledge to them. With the scholars joining the army and the sudden opening of the Yang Clan Academy, the Yang Clan manor instantly became the focus of all the scholars' condemnation. Some people even dug up Yang Chendong's history, claiming that he had only been an elementary scholar and that even his status as a high scholar had been bestowed upon him by emperor. Perhaps he had some literary talent, knew how to do business, and even knew a little about the art of war. But when it came to opening an academy, he was far too lacking. One had to know that those who were able to open an academy had to have sufficient knowledge to do so. It was not something that could be done by a random brat. There were many voices of opposition. Similarly, there were many supporters. Because of Yang Chendong, many of his books were published, and he was hailed as the #1 prodigy of the younger generation. In addition, he had composed many new songs, earning him the title of Eastern Commander. He had saved Emperor Ing, defeated Wala, and protected the position of Emperor Dai. This caused his fame to soar, and he had many admirers in the army. How could such a person lack supporters? If this was in the future, Yang Chendong could probably create a Weibo account and have tens of millions of fans in just a few minutes. There were supporters, but there were also opponents. The matter became more and more serious. Eventually, the matter reached the imperial court and reached Zhu Qiyu, the acting sect master. Zhu Qizhen had some headaches about Yang Chendong. Although this person was an official, due to his young age, he didn't seem to have the awareness of being an official. He had once been conferred the title of General of Agile Cavalry, which was equivalent to a second-rank official, but he had never attended the royal court. It was even very difficult for him, the emperor, to see him. In his own words, he was still young and too playful. He would talk about politics in the royal court later. Given that Yang Chendong's actions were always unexpected, Zhu Qiu agreed to his request. After all, he was also worried that this person would cause trouble today and tomorrow, causing headaches. However, he didn't expect that even if he didn't enter the royal court, he would still be able to cause trouble. It was like setting up a Yang family academy. You don't do good business, but learn the elegance of a scholar. Isn't this looking for trouble? Zhu Qiu had a headache. In the royal court, there were people loudly criticizing, but there were also many officials who lowered their heads in silence to show their support. He couldn't help but feel a little headache. My beloved subjects, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has only opened an academy. As far as I know, he didn't recruit many people, only 50. This doesn't seem to be a big deal. Why do you need to bring it up to the imperial court? Your Majesty, that's not right. As soon as Zhu Qiu's voice fell, an old official stepped out from the crowd. He held a ceremonial tablet in his hand and had a serious and nervous expression on his face. Teaching and educating people is something that can only be done if there are great scholars and virtuous practitioners. Although Duke Zhongdan is quite good in other aspects, he is only a scholar. How can he take on such an important task? The person who spoke was called He Wenyuan. His courtesy name was Zhu Chuan, and his title was Dongyuan. He was also called Dunnan, and he was from Shujiang Town in Guangchang County. He Wenyuan was knowledgeable and well-versed in astronomy and geography. He was very talented in writing and was good at poetry. His works included Dongyuan Ji, Yiding Sun, 4 books lecture, records of rites and explanations, Dun and Memorial, Herdsman's Spare Book, Criminal Magistrate's Spare Book, and so on. At that time, he was the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. His appearance represented the attitude of the literati. It was a rejection of Yang Chendong's so-called Yang Academy. Speaking of which, Yang Chendong came from a famous family. He was the youngest son of Yang Rong, one of the 3 Yangs. He had also become a scholar at a young age, so he should have been a model scholar. However, he chose to be a merchant in place of an official and led the army into battle. He went from a literati to a semi-martial person and obtained the position of duke. He became a duke before the age of 20. This made many people envious, and many people secretly refused to accept it. They only thought that if they had the chance, they would teach Yang Chendong a lesson and teach him a lesson. After all, a person who reached the peak before the age of 20 that many people would never be able to reach in their lifetime would have such a mentality. Chapter 232. He had always been jealous, but he had lacked an opportunity to ignite it. Now that Yang Chendong was going to open an academy, He Wenyuan, as one of the great scholars, had to express his stance. That's right, that's right. With someone stepping forward, many of the civil officials nodded their heads in agreement, clearly showing their support for He Wenyuan. The reason why so many of the officials stood up to oppose Yang Chendong was not only because of jealousy, but also because of the rules of scholars. Did scholars have rules? Of course they did. Every profession had its own rules, and anyone who wanted to break them would have to pay a heavy price. It was normal for scholars to open academies to teach and educate people. Not only could he promote his name, but he could also take the opportunity to recruit more students, expand his influence, and also collect a lot of money. This was a typical way for scholars to make a fortune. However, because of this, not everyone could open an academy. If one did not have a certain amount of social influence or was not recognized by the group of scholars, opening an academy would only cause them to be criticized, because the scholars would not allow such a thing to happen. Otherwise, if anyone could open an academy, where would they be able to make a living? Whether it was out of jealousy or wanting to maintain their own status and influence. In short, if Yang Chendong wanted to get involved in the matter of starting an academy, they would definitely stop him. He Wenyuan stood up, and then several influential civil officials stood up to express their opposition. Zhu Qiu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, narrowed his eyes into a line. He knew how powerful the civil officials were, and he knew that deep down, these scholars looked down on him. This was the disadvantage of only respecting Confucianism. This was because once upon a time, the the founders of the Great Ming Dynasty had also been rejected by the scholars. It was only because the Great Saber and Great Stick were too powerful that they had no choice but to lower their heads. In fact, in the changing of dynasties, there were very few emperors who were truly recognized by the scholars. On the contrary, in their hearts, the true orthodox was Confucius's Kong family. That was their pilgrimage ground. With the change of dynasties, countless emperors fell from their horses, countless scholars were killed, and countless commoners were displaced from place to place. But no matter how one looked at it, the Kong clan had always stood strong. The Kong family was the epitome of a man's ability to submit and stand tall. The Mongols came to visit the Mongols, and the Manchus came to visit the Manchus. Li Zicheng had just entered Shandong and was still far away from Ciufu when he shouted, "Long live Emperor Yongchang." When Yuan Shikai proclaimed himself emperor, he said, "Ascend the throne as soon as possible to comfort the people." Zhang Sun was overjoyed after his restoration. Let the whole world celebrate. In 1937, before the Japanese army invaded China, Kong Deqing, the sage Duke of Yenxing, had a great interest in poetry. He advocated that China and Japan were of the same language and the same kind. The poem said, "Rivers, rivers, rivers, pearls, and streams are the same. How could there be different people in the same province?" This was a little confusing. Were you trying to express goodwill to the locust army? The longevity of the Kong clan was even greater than that of the imperial family. It was even a holy land for scholars in the world. Even the emperor sometimes had to look at his face when doing things. Just like Zhu Qiyu in history, in order to make his son Zhu Jianji the crown prince, he actually bribed the officials of the imperial court. In the history books, the scholars of the imperial court received a special reward from the emperor, 50 taels of gold and double the amount of silver. Why would the Jingtai emperor, Zhu Qiyu, want to reward the officials? It turned out that the reward this time was actually a bribe. The Jingtai emperor wanted to use the reward to shut the mouths of the officials, to keep their mouths shut. This was why the Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, looked at the gold and silver rewarded by the emperor and stamped his feet. He said, "What is this? I am ashamed to death." Even the emperor sometimes had to look at the faces of scholars, not to mention Yang Chendong wanting to establish an academy. With his status and qualifications, it was normal for him to be opposed and reprimanded by everyone. However, Yang Chendong had just made a great contribution and was given the title of Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Moreover, he was stripped of all his other powers. At this moment, how could Zhu Qiyu make irresponsible remarks to him? Since the scholars weren't willing to let him establish an academy, he'd just let the scholars handle it. Thinking of this, his expression relaxed a lot. As for the matter of Zhonghua opening the Yang Family Academy, we still need to consider it carefully. Of course, if there are any officials who disagree, you can go and reason with them. This is also a way to promote the culture of our great Ming dynasty. Zhu Qiyu didn't say that he was against it, but he also didn't say that he was for it. If you have the ability, go find the Duke of Loyalty and Courage yourselves. This was also Zhu Qiyu's answer. With the emperor's words, He Wenyuan and the others immediately beamed with joy. They were worried that the emperor would agree. If that was the case, they would be going against the emperor's will if they went to the Yang clan manor. This could be used against them by the embroidered uniform guards and the Eastern faction guards. But now that they had the emperor's decree, they could do things with fewer misgivings. Immortal Abode. The streets were bustling with people and carriages, vividly displaying the prosperity of the capital. The Immortal Abode, where the world's best delicacies and best services were gathered, the sky beyond heaven, where all the world's rare treasures were gathered, and the Yang clan's bank had mountains of gold and silver. Because of this, the entire street was bustling with activity. If anyone who came to the capital didn't come here to take a look, they would be too embarrassed to say that they had ever been to the capital. This place had already become a symbol of the capital. This was especially true for the entrance to the Immortal Abode. Ever since breakfast, it had been packed with people. By the time the performance started, there wasn't a single empty seat to be seen. As the number of members increased by the day, It was becoming increasingly difficult to reserve a seat in advance. If even the members were like this, there was no need to mention the visitors. As the new year approached, more and more foreign ambassadors arrived. When they wanted to taste the delicacies here, they had no choice but to line up with the common folk of the great Ming dynasty. Even though most of those who could come here wore silk robes and had a certain level of status, it was still viewed as an insult to the common folk to line up with them. There had been a number of ministers who had disagreed on this matter. They said that the foreign ambassadors should be given special treatment to express the magnanimity of the great Ming dynasty. But Emperor Daizong had sent these memorials to Yang Chendong. The immortal abode was his place, so the decision was naturally up to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong had only memorized the names of the people who had written these memorials, but he hadn't read their contents in detail. Why did foreign ambassadors have to be superior to others? Worshipping foreigners was a sign of weakness deep in one's bones. Since Yang Chendong had come, he would never allow such a thing to happen. Treating everyone equally was already extremely benevolent. If it weren't for the fact that he needed to earn money from the foreign ambassadors right now, he would have already issued an order that only Han citizens were allowed to enter. Yang Chendong's indifference meant that the foreign ambassadors who wanted to enter the immortal abode had no choice but to line up. Even though they were full of grievances and had expressions of displeasure, when they knew that the rules couldn't be changed, there were still people who came to line up outside the immortal abode. Today, there was a woman in the line with an indifferent expression. She was indeed an astonishingly beautiful woman. She was dressed in the women's clothing of the great Ming dynasty. Her skin was as white as snow, and her eyes were as bright as the moon. In particular, her exquisite facial features made men's hearts itch. Speaking of which, this woman had quite the background. She wasn't actually a citizen of the great Ming dynasty, but rather a Japanese who lived at sea. Her name was Ohara Junko. Among the many people in the queue, Ohara Junko was undoubtedly an angel. Her appearance also made some of the men who were originally shouting in the queue shut their mouths. It seemed that they all wanted to leave a good impression in front of such a beauty. Junko was also protected by a few guards who weren't very tall, but had cold eyes. This only served to highlight her noble status. Her identity was truly not simple. Junko's father was Hito, the current emperor of the Inner Garden of Japan. She had come to the capital of the great Ming dynasty to broaden her horizons and seek opportunities. Hito was the emperor of the Muromachi period, the 102nd emperor. He had ascended the throne on September 7, 1428. He was the great-grandson of Emperor Hito, the son of Prince Fushimi Masayoshi, and the adopted son of Emperor Gokomatsu. He was also known as the Emperor of the Inner Garden. During the reign of the Emperor of the Inner Garden, not only was there a rebellion between two Ichiki and Kaji, the dissatisfied people of the southern dynasty were also rioting, causing the political situation to become unstable. In addition, General Ashikaga Yoshimasa lived a life of luxury and enjoyed himself. His power was immense, and the emperor had to reprimand him. It was precisely because the domestic situation was unstable that the emperor of the Inner Garden wanted to find a way out from outside. This time, when he heard that the new emperor of the great Ming dynasty defeated the elite cavalry of Wala, he sent an envoy with the intention of strengthening the relationship between the two countries and seeking some help. Junko came with the envoy for another purpose. According to the emperor of the Inner Garden, if his daughter could be married to the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, then he would have a powerful foreign aid, and at that time, his words in Japan would be much more powerful. In order to achieve this goal, the appearance of his daughter Junko was still a secret. At least before the matter was settled, it was not suitable to spread it out and attract the attention of other forces in the country. But now, Junko appeared in public so calmly because her matter had already come to an end. That was, the acting emperor of the great Ming dynasty had a new empress and more than a dozen concubines. It was difficult for her to find a suitable position to intervene now. Moreover, her son was too young and was still in his infancy. In any case, it was impossible for him to marry Junko and form an alliance with Japan. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.